Rain hammered down from the dark sky, turning the dirt road into a river of mud. Grace Whitley's soaked dress clung to her trembling body as Warren Blackwood's fingers dug deeper into her wrist. Her hair, once neatly pinned, now hung in wet strands across her face. She tried to pull away, but his grip only tightened. "No one can hear you scream out here," Warren whispered, his breath hot against her ear, smelling of whiskey and hate. His other hand grabbed her hair, yanking her head back. "You've been avoiding me long enough." Grace's boots slipped in the mud as she struggled. The rain washed away her tears, but not her fear. The townspeople of Willow Creek were all inside, doors shut against the storm curtains drawn against what they didn't want to see. No one would help her. No one ever did. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the drumming rain. "I'll get your money. I just need more time." Warren laughed to sound like gravel underfoot. "Time's up, Grace. But there are other ways to settle a debt." The darkness around them shifted. At first, Grace thought it was just the rain playing tricks on her eyes. Then a shadow detached itself from the black canvas of night. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a long coat and wide-brimmed hat, moved with the silent precision of a mountain lion. Warren didn't see him until it was too late. One moment he was dragging Grace through the mud. The next he was sprawled on his back, blood streaming from his nose, eyes wide with shock. The stranger stood over Warren, rain cascading off his hat brim, saying nothing. His silence was more terrifying than any threat could have been. "This ain't your business, mister." Warren spat, scrambling backward in the mud. The stranger still didn't speak. He just watched, as still as death, until Warren struggled to his feet and staggered away, cursing into the night. Only then did the man turn to Grace. He reached down with a hand that bore the calluses of hard work and the scars of old wounds. She hesitated, then placed her trembling fingers in his palm. He helped her up as if she were made of glass, fragile and precious. Not a word passed between them as he led her back to her small cabin at the edge of town. He didn't ask questions when she fumbled with the key, didn't comment on the disarray inside. He simply lit the fire, hung his coat by the door, and set a water to boil for tea. In the growing firelight, Grace caught glimpses of his face-weathered skin, a beard that hadn't seen a razor in weeks, and eyes deep-set and gray as winter skies that seemed to have witnessed too much suffering. When the tea was ready, he placed a cup on the table and moved toward the door. "Wait," Grace said, finding her voice at last. "Why did you help me?" The stranger paused, his hand on the door latch. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. "Nobody else would," he said finally, his voice low and rough, as if unused to speaking. Before stepping out into the rain, he glanced at a wooden box sitting on her shelf, her medical kit untouched for 2 years, gathering dust. Something in his eyes changed, softened perhaps. Sometimes what we leave behind is the only thing that can move us forward. Then he was gone, swallowed by the storm, leaving Grace staring at the open door, clutching her tea with shaking hands, wondering who this man was who had saved her with violence, but tended to her with gentleness. 3 days earlier, the white church stood like a forgotten sentinel at the edge of Willow Creek. Its paint peeled in long strips, windows cracked in cloudy weeds, pushing through the stone steps where brides once posed for photographs and children chased each other after Sunday services. The building leaned slightly as if tired of standing it alone. Much like Grace Whitley herself, she walked down the dusty main street, ignoring the stares that followed her. 2 years as a widow had taught her the art of not seeing, not hearing. The whispers still reached her ears, though poor thing still wearing black. Thomas Whitley wasn't worth all that mourning. Heard she hasn't touched a patient since he died. Curse that one. Best keep your distance. Grace kept her eyes fixed ahead, clutching her basket tighter. The store was her destination, though she dreaded seeing Warren Blackwood's smug face. The monthly supplies couldn't wait any longer, however. Her pantry was bare, and pride wouldn't fill an empty stomach. The bell above the door announced her arrival. The general store smelled of coffee leather and tobacco. 3 men leaning against the counter fell silent as she entered. Warren emerged from behind a stack of flour sacks, his smile too wide, too eager. "Mrs. Whitley," he said, emphasizing her married title as if it were a joke. "What a pleasant surprise." Grace nodded curtly. "Mr. Blackwood, I need supplies." Warren made a show of checking his ledger. "Seems you're still behind on last month's payment. I'm not sure I can extend more credit." "I have money today," Grace said, producing a small mouth of coins she'd earned mending clothes for the schoolteacher's family. Warren's eyebrows rose. "Well, now that changes things." He leaned across the counter close enough that she could smell the pomade in his hair. "Though I was hoping we might come to another arrangement." Grace stepped back. "Just the supplies, please." As Warren gathered her order, the door opened air again. The men at the counter stiffened. Grace turned to see a stranger enter tall, with a dust-covered coat that reached his knees and a hat pulled low over his eyes. He moved with deliberate ease, surveying the room with a single glance that seemed to catalog every person, every exit. The stranger nodded at the storekeeper. "Whiskey Depot." He said, his voice like stone grinding against stone. Warren handed him a bottle without comment, an unusual restraint for a man who typically had something to say to everyone. The stranger paid and left without another word. Who was that, Grace found herself asking. One of the men at the counter, old Jim Miller, who'd lived in Willow Creek longer than most, shook his head. Trouble, most likely. Men like that don't come to dying towns unless they're running from something, or hunting someone, another added. Warren slid Grace's supplies across the counter. "Best mind your own affairs, Mrs. Whitley. Men like that aren't for decent women to concern themselves with." Grace gathered her purchases, wondering at Warren's sudden protective tone. It wasn't concern for her welfare. Warren Blackwood had never shown an ounce of kindness that wasn't calculated for his benefit. Outside, she saw the stranger sitting beneath the awning of the saloon across the street, drinking straight from the bottle. He didn't seem to notice her yet. Somehow, Grace felt certain his attention missed nothing. As she made her way home, Sheriff Sherman Porter stepped out of his office, blocking her path. The old lawman had been a fixture in Willow Creek for decades, his weathered face as much a part of the landscape as the hills themselves. "Mrs. Whitley," he said, tipping his hat, "might want to head home before the storm hits." Grace looked up at the gathering clouds. "Thank you, Sheriff. I was just on my way." Sherman glanced down the street toward the saloon. "Noticed we have a visitor in town. Has he given you any trouble?" "No," Grace replied. "I haven't spoken to him." "Best keep it that way." The sheriff's roomy eyes narrowed. "Something familiar about him, though." "Can't place it." Grace nodded and continued on her way, feeling the weight of the sheriff's gaze on her back. Everyone in Willow Creek seemed to know everyone else's business except when it came to helping those in need. Then suddenly, no one saw anything at all. Her cabin sat back from the road, partially hidden by a stand of gnarled juniper trees. It was small, but had once been well tended. Thomas had kept the fence painted white, the garden flourishing with vegetables and herbs. Now the paint flaked, the garden overrun with weeds, the roof missing shingles. Inside wasn't much better. Grace had maintained cleanliness, but lacked the skill or strength for repairs. The hearth was cold. The rocking chair beside it, empty. On the shelf above her medical kit gathered dust, a relic from another life. Grace had been a battlefield nurse during the war, tending to wounded soldiers with steady hands and a compassionate heart. She'd saved countless lives, stanched bleeding, amputated limbs when necessary, soothed fevers, and written final letters home for the dying. Then she'd met Thomas Whitley, a soft-spoken Southern soldier with a merchant's background, who'd fought for the Confederacy but harbored no lingering hatred. They'd married after the war, seeking a fresh start, far from the blood-soaked fields of Virginia and Pennsylvania. Willow Creek had seemed perfect, a small town needing both a general store merchant and someone with medical knowledge. For a while, they'd been happy Grace had treated the townspeople's ailments while Thomas built his business, but the town had turned on them gradually after learning of Thomas's Confederate past. Business dwindled. Thomas had grown desperate, turning to Warren Blackwood for loans. Then came the flood, 2 years ago. The creek that gave the town its name had swelled with spring rains, bursting its banks in the night. Thomas had rushed out to save their mule, or so everyone said. His body was found 2 miles downstream the next morning. Grace hadn't touched her medical kit since. What good were healing hands that couldn't save the one person who mattered most? She placed her supplies in the pantry and sat in the rocking chair listening to the first patters of rain on the roof. Her fingers traced the worn arms of the chair, remembering how Thomas would sit here in the evenings while reading aloud from whatever book they'd ordered from the catalog. Her gaze drifted to the mantelpiece where a silver pocket watch used to sit, a Whitley family heirloom with an inscription. "Time heals all wounds, but love transcends time." Thomas had pawned it to Warren before his death. Grace had worked 2 years to save enough to redeem it, only to have Warren raise the price each time she came close. The watch was more than metal and gears. It was the last piece of Thomas she could hold on to. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Grace hugged herself alone with memories and a growing sense that something in Willow Creek had shifted with the arrival of the stranger. Ethan Hayes knew he was being watched. He felt the stares from behind curtains, from the shadowed doorway of the sheriff's office, from the group of men outside the saloon pretending not to notice him. Small towns were all the same, suspicious of outsiders, protective of their secrets, quick to judge, but slow to act. It made his work easier in some ways, harder in others. He took another swig from the bottle, though he had no taste for the burning liquid. Appearances mattered. A drifter with a whiskey bottle attracted less scrutiny than a sober man asking questions. The woman, Grace Whitley, was exactly as described in the letter. Brown hair streaked prematurely with silver eyes that had witnessed too much suffering, shoulders that bore invisible burdens. She moved through town like a ghost, present, but unseen, affecting nothing and no one. Except she had affected Ethan, though he couldn't say why. Perhaps it was the dignity in her bearing that acquired resilience, that reminded him of soldiers who'd lost limbs, but not spirit. Or maybe it was simply that he recognized a fellow survivor. The rain began in earnest, driving people indoors. Ethan remained beneath the awning, letting the storm wall him off from the town's curious eyes. He had time. Rushing only led to mistakes, and he'd made enough of those in his life. His gaze drifted to the sheriff's office. Something about the old lawman nagged at him, a half-remembered face from a time Ethan worked hard to forget. Not that it mattered. The past was a foreign country. Ethan had no desire to revisit. As darkness fell, Ethan spotted Warren Blackwood leaving his store, locking the door behind him. Instead of heading to the room he kept above the saloon, Warren turned in the direction of Grace's cabin. Ethan waited a full minute before following, keeping to the shadows, moving with the careful silence that had kept him alive through the war in the tumultuous years after. The rain masked his footsteps, the darkness his presence. He watched from the edge of the juniper grove as Warren pounded on Grace's door. When she opened it, Warren pushed his way inside without invitation. Through the window, Ethan could see them arguing. Grace backed away as Warren advanced, his finger jabbing the air between them. Ethan's hand instinctively moved to the knife at his belt. Not yet, he told himself. Observe, understand, then act. Warren's voice carried through the thin walls, loud enough for Ethan to catch fragments. Think you're better than everyone? Husband was a coward and a thief. One way or another, you'll pay what's owed. When Warren grabbed Grace's arm, dragging her toward the door, Ethan had seen enough. He slipped away, circling to intercept them on the road leading back to town. The rest happened as if scripted. Warren pulling Grace through the mud, Ethan emerging from the darkness. The brief, efficient violence. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Violence had always come easily to Ethan. Too easily, his sister would say. Now, leaving Grace's cabin after ensuring she was safe, Ethan felt the familiar restlessness returning. He should move on, complete his task without entanglements. The woman was a complication he hadn't planned for. Yet he found himself walking not toward the saloon where he'd rented a room, but to the abandoned blacksmith's shed at the edge of town. Inside, protected from the rain, he unfolded a letter written on official stationery. Mr. Hayes's evidence has surfaced, linking Warren Blackwood of Willow Creek to the trafficking operation we've been investigating. As suspected, he's using his position as storekeeper and creditor to identify vulnerable women, particularly widows with no family connections. Judge Harmon believes Blackwood may also be connected to the Rowland murder, though we lack evidence to make an arrest. Your task is observation only. Document Blackwood's activities and associations, but do not engage directly. Remember, we need him to lead us to his brother and the rest of the network. One man's crimes are not worth jeopardizing the larger operation. Marshal Collins. Ethan refolded the letter, tucking it inside his coat. He'd already broken his instructions by interfering with Blackwood's treatment of Grace Whitley. It wasn't the first time Ethan had disobeyed orders, and likely wouldn't be the last. Some lines couldn't be crossed no matter what was at stake. Watching a woman be dragged through the mud while doing nothing was one of those lines. He settled against the wall, prepared for another sleepless night. Sleep had been his enemy since Gettysburg, bringing with it faces of men he'd killed, comrades he'd failed to save, and the constant gnawing certainty that no amount of good deeds could balance the blood on his hands. So Ethan watched the rain instead, listening to its steady rhythm on the roof, counting the seconds between lightning and thunder, calculating distances and probabilities, anything to keep the ghosts at bay for one more night. Morning broke clear and crisp, the storm having scrubbed the air clean. Grace rose early, her body aching from yesterday's ordeal. Bruises darkened her wrist where Warren had gripped her, a reminder that her troubles were far from over. She moved through her morning routine, mechanically stoking the fire-boiling water for coffee, changing into her worn blue dress. The teacup from last night sat empty on the table, evidence that the stranger's intervention hadn't been a dream. Grace's gaze drifted to the medical kit on the shelf. The stranger had noticed it had spoken about leaving things behind. What did he know of her past? What had brought him to Willow Creek, and why had he helped her? Questions without answers. Grace had learned to live with those. She needed water from the well. It meant going into town, risking another encounter with Warren, but she couldn't avoid people forever. Gathering her shawl and bucket, she stepped outside. The morning was still young, the town barely stirring. Grace kept her head down as she walked, avoiding eye contact with a few people already about their business. The blacksmith nodded as she passed. Mrs. Peterson, sweeping her porch, offered a tight smile. Neither mentioned last night's events, though Grace suspected everyone already knew. At the well in the town square, Grace was surprised to find the stranger Ethan. Someone had called him drawing water. He wore the same long coat, despite the warm morning, his hat shading his eyes. When he turned and saw her, he showed no surprise, as if he'd been expecting her. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat slightly. Grace nodded, unsure what to say. Thank you seemed inadequate for what he'd done, yet anything more felt too intimate for a stranger. He handed her the bucket he'd just filled. "Take this one, I'll draw another. You don't have to." "I know." His voice was quiet but firm. Grace accepted the bucket, studying him openly now. In daylight, she could see his features more clearly. Mid-30s, perhaps, with lines around his eyes that spoke of hard years. A scar ran along his jawline, partially hidden by his beard. His hands, working the well's rope with practiced efficiency, bore smaller scars across the knuckles. A fighter's hands, yet they had been gentle when helping her up from the mud. "I wanted to thank you," Grace said finally, "for last night." Ethan nodded once, acknowledging her words without looking up from his task. "May I ask your name?" she pressed. He hesitated, then said, "Ethan Hayes. I'm Grace Whitley." "I know." The simple statement sent a chill through her. "How do you know who I am?" Ethan finished drawing water before answering. "Small town. People talk." Before she could question him further, Sheriff Porter approached his gate, stiff from old war wounds that pained him in the mornings. "Mrs. Whitley," he said pointedly, ignoring Ethan. "Everything all right? Heard there was some trouble last night." Grace clutched her bucket tighter. "Nothing I couldn't handle, Sheriff." "Warren Blackwood says differently," claims this stranger. He jerked his head toward Ethan, assaulted him without provocation. "That's not what happened," Grace said, heat rising in her cheeks. "Warren was?" "I'd advise you to stay out of Willow Creek business." Mr. Hayes, the sheriff, interrupted, finally acknowledging Ethan's presence. "We take care of our own here." Ethan met the sheriff's gaze levelly. "Didn't look that way to me." Sheriff Porter's hand drifted toward his holstered pistol. "You passing through, or do you have business in our town?" "Just passing through," Ethan replied, his posture relaxed despite the sheriff's threatening stance. "Best continue on your way then." "Today?" Grace stepped between them. "Sheriff, Mr. Hayes helped me when no one else would. I won't have him run out of town for doing what was right. The sheriff's weathered face softened slightly when he looked at her. "Grace, I've known you since you came to Willow Creek. You're a good woman who's had more than her share of hardship, but you need to be careful about the company you keep. Some men bring trouble wherever they go." With a final warning glance at Ethan, the sheriff walked away, his boots kicking up little puffs of dust. Ethan picked up his bucket. "Your sheriff's right about one thing. I do bring trouble." "Is that why you're here, Trouble?" Grace asked. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Isn't everyone running from something or someone?" He walked away before she could respond, leaving Grace with more questions than before. She watched him go, struck by the contradiction of a man who claimed to bring trouble, yet had shown her nothing but kindness. As she turned to leave, Grace noticed Warren watching from the doorway of his store, his face darkened by a bruise across the bridge of his nose. The look he gave her promised that last night's confrontation was far from over. Grace lifted her chin and walked past him without acknowledgement. She had endured worse than Warren Blackwood's anger. What concerned her more was the growing certainty that Ethan Hayes had come to Willow Creek for a specific purpose, and that she had somehow become entangled in whatever dangerous game he was playing. The next week passed in a strange rhythm of tension and waiting. Ethan remained in Willow Creek despite the sheriff's warning, taking odd jobs mending Jacob Wilson's barn roof, chopping firewood for the widow Parker, helping the livery stable break a particularly stubborn horse. Each morning before dawn, Grace would find a neat stack of firewood by her door. Her gate, which had hung crookedly for months, was suddenly repaired. The leak in her roof vanished. She never saw Ethan doing these things, yet she knew it was him. Warren Blackwood kept his distance, but watched her constantly. Grace felt his eyes following her movements whenever she came to town, calculating, patient, waiting for the right moment to strike again. On the 7th day after the rain, Grace ventured to the small creek that ran behind her property. The water level had receded, leaving behind rich, damp soil along the banks. She carried a basket and a small garden trowel, determined to reclaim a piece of her former life. The garden had been Thomas's pride. After the war, he'd found peace in coaxing life from the earth. Grace had let it go to ruin, and after his death, another abandonment in a life marked by loss. She knelt by the remains of what had once been a vegetable patch, pulling weeds with methodical determination. The physical labor felt good grounding. For the first time in months, Grace allowed herself to remember Thomas without the crushing weight of grief, his laughter as he chased rabbits from the lettuce, the streak of dirt he always managed to get across his forehead, the way he'd present her with the first ripe tomato of the season, as if offering the crown jewels. He loved this garden. Grace startled at the voice, nearly dropping her trowel. Ethan stood a few paces away, holding an axe across his shoulder, clearly having come from chopping wood. "How would you know that?" Grace asked, unsettled by his seeming knowledge of her life. Ethan gestured toward the careful layout of the beds, the stone-lined paths between them now overgrown, but still visible. A man who plants like this with such care for order and beauty. He wasn't just growing food. He was creating something he loved. Grace sat back on her heels, studying Ethan with new curiosity. "You garden, my mother did." Something in his expression closed like shutters against a storm. "Need help clearing those beds?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I'd appreciate that." Ethan set down his axe and knelt beside her, his hands surprisingly deft as they pulled weeds and turned soil. They worked in companionable silence for a time, the only sounds the birds in the juniper trees and the soft rush of the creek. "Why are you helping me?" Grace finally asked the question that had lingered since that rainy night. Ethan continued, working eyes on the task. "Does there need to be a reason?" "In my experience, yes. People don't help without expecting something in return." His hands stilled. "And what does Warren Blackwood expect in return for his help?" Grace's jaw tightened. "That's not your concern?" "It became my concern when he dragged you through the mud." Ethan's voice remained even, but she sensed the anger beneath it. "What hold does he have over you?" Grace considered deflecting again, but something about Ethan's steady presence made her want to unburden herself. "My husband borrowed money from him before he died." I've been working to pay it back, but the debt never seems to get smaller. And there's something else. Ethan prompted his perception uncomfortably accurate. Grace sighed. A pocket watch silver with an inscription. It was a Whitley family heirloom. Thomas pawned it to Warren before the flood. I've been trying to redeem it. Time heals all wounds, but love transcends time, Ethan said softly. Grace's head snapped up. How do you know that Ethan's expression gave nothing away? Just a common saying. But Grace wasn't fooled. The inscription had been unique, crafted specifically for Thomas's great-grandparents on their wedding day. No one in Willow Creek would know those words except Warren, and now somehow Ethan Hayes. Before she could press him further, a shout came from the direction of the road. A moment later, a young woman appeared at the edge of the garden, hands on her hips, surveying the scene with obvious disapproval. Of course I'd find you playing in the dirt instead of doing what you came here for, the woman said, addressing Ethan. She was perhaps 25, with the same gray eyes as Ethan, but a leaner, sharper face. Her clothes were practical men's trousers, a loose shirt, and a jacket that had seen better days. A knife hung openly at her belt, and Grace suspected there were other weapons concealed about her person. Ethan stood wiping his hands on his pants. Abigail, I didn't expect you so soon. Clearly, the young woman turned her attention to Grace. And you must be the widow who's got my brother forgetting his purpose. Abby, Ethan warned, his voice taking on an edge Grace hadn't heard before. Grace rose to her feet, bristling at the young woman's tone. I'm Grace Whitley, and your brother has been kind enough to help with some repairs. Abigail snorted. I'm sure he has. He's always had a weakness for damsels in distress. She looked around the property with a critical eye. Though I have to say, this is a step up from his usual rescues. At least you own land. That's enough, Ethan said, stepping between them. Grace, this is my sister, Abigail Hayes. She lacks manners, but means well. Usually. Abigail rolled her eyes. We need to talk privately. Ethan nodded, then turned to Grace. I'll come back tomorrow to finish with the garden, if that's all right. Of course, Grace said, though she was now uncertain whether she wanted him to return. His sister's arrival had raised fresh questions about Ethan's presence in Willow Creek. As the siblings walked away, Grace heard Abigail's fierce whisper, You were supposed to be watching Blackwood, not playing house with his latest victim. Ethan's reply was too low to catch, but the set of his shoulders spoke of conflict and tension. Grace stared after them, a cold realization settling in her stomach. Ethan Hayes hadn't come to Willow Creek by chance. He was watching Warren Blackwood, which meant he was likely a lawman or a bounty hunter. Either way, his interest in helping her had probably been nothing more than a convenient cover for his true purpose. The thought shouldn't have hurt as much as it did. Ethan led Abigail to the blacksmith's shed where he'd been sleeping away from curious eyes at the saloon. His sister took in the sparse accommodations bedroll on the dirt floor, saddled as a pillow coat hung on a nail, with a shake of her head. Still living like you expect to run at any moment, she observed. Old habits, Ethan replied, checking that the door was securely closed before continuing. What news from Marshal Collins? Abigail sat on an upturned bucket, stretching her legs in front of her. Blackwood's brother has been spotted in Carson City. They think the next shipment of girls is coming through in 2 weeks. That doesn't give us much time. It would be plenty if you'd been doing your job instead of fixing leaky roofs. Abigail's reply was accusatory, but her eyes held concern. What's going on, Ethan? This isn't like you. Ethan paced the small space, restless energy radiating from him. I'm doing exactly what Collins asked, watching Blackwood. I'm just helping the widow while I'm at it. The widow Abigail studied her brother's face. You know, every time you try to save someone, you end up in more trouble than they were in to begin with. This is different. That's what you said in Carson's Valley and in St. Louis, and look how those turned out. Ethan stopped, pacing, his jaw tight. I didn't kill Judge Rowland. I know that, Abigail said, her voice softening. But a man still ended up dead, and you nearly got hanged for it. How many times can you tempt fate before it turns against you for good? The question hung in the air between them, unanswerable. Ethan had spent years walking the knife's edge between justice and vengeance, law and violence. Each time he intervened to help someone in need, the line blurred further. What does she know about you? Abigail asked after a moment. Nothing. Keep it that way. Abigail stood, placing a hand on her brother's arm. I'm worried about you, Ethan. You haven't slept properly since the war. You moved from town to town, never staying anywhere long enough to build a life. And every woman in trouble you meet becomes a stand-in for Eliza. At the mention of that name, Ethan's expression hardened. This has nothing to do with Eliza. Doesn't it, a vulnerable widow being preyed upon by a powerful man just like our sister was? Stop, Abigail pressed on. Eliza's been dead for 8 years, Ethan. Saving this Grace woman won't bring her back. It won't wash the blood from your hands. Nothing will. Ethan turned away, unable to face the truth in his sister's words. Abigail had always been the practical one, seeing clearly where he saw only through the lens of his guilt. Just focus on Blackwood, Abigail said more gently. Get the evidence Collins needs, then we'll move on to the next town, the next mission. It's what we do, and if Blackwood hurts her in the meantime, then you deal with it without compromising the larger operation. Abigail headed for the door. I'll be staying at the hotel in Taylor's Ridge, 10 miles east. Less chance of anyone connecting us that way. I'll check in every few days. After she left, Ethan sat on his bedroll, turning his knife over and over in his hands. The blade caught the light filtering through cracks in the shed walls, flashing like memory. Eliza Hayes had been 19 when she disappeared. Beautiful, headstrong, determined to make her own way after their parents died. Ethan had been fighting in Virginia, unable to protect her. By the time he returned, she had fallen prey to men who trafficked young women to mining camps and frontier towns, starved for female companionship. He'd found her too late, already buried in an unmarked grave behind a brothel in Denver. The madam had been kind enough to tell him how Eliza had died beaten by a customer, then denied medical care because she was damaged goods. Ethan had killed that customer with his bare hands. It was the first life he'd taken outside of war, but not the last. He'd spent the years since hunting men who profited from women's suffering, first as a vigilante, then later as an unofficial agent for lawmen like Marshal Collins, who understood that sometimes justice required operating in the shadows. Warren Blackwood was just another link in a long chain of evil that stretched across the Western Territories. But Grace Whitley was different from the other women Ethan had encountered in his work. There was a dignity to her suffering, a quiet strength that reminded him not of Eliza, but of the better parts of himself, the parts he feared had died in the blood-soaked fields of Gettysburg. Ethan knew he should heed Abigail's warning. Getting close to Grace would only complicate his mission and potentially put her in greater danger. The wisest course would be to maintain his distance while continuing to observe Blackwood's activities. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Grace kneeling in the garden, determination in every line of her body as she reclaimed a piece of her past. And he knew with a certainty that defied logic that he could not stand aside if Warren Blackwood threatened her again. Some risks were worth taking, even if they led to ruin. The next morning, Grace found not just firewood by her door, but also a small burlap sack containing vegetable seeds, carrots, beans, tomatoes, squash. No note accompanied them, but she knew who had left them. She spent the day clearing more of the garden, working until her back ached and her hands were raw. Physical labor helped quiet her mind, pushing away thoughts of Ethan Hayes and his mysterious purpose in Willow Creek. As dusk approached, Grace heard footsteps on the path. She looked up expecting to see Ethan, but instead found Sheriff Porter making his way toward her, hat in hand. "Evening, Mrs. Whitley," he said, nodding respectfully. "Garden's looking better." Grace straightened, pushing a strand of hair from her face. "Thank you, Sheriff. What brings you out this way?" The old lawman shifted uncomfortably. "Wanted to check on you, make sure you're not having any more difficulties with Warren or with Ethan Hayes," Grace suggested. Sheriff Porter's weathered face creased in a frown. "That man concerns me, Grace. He's not what he seems." "Few people are," Grace replied, setting down her trowel. "Would you like some coffee?" The sheriff followed her to the porch, settling into one of the 2 chairs, while Grace went inside to fetch the coffee pot from the stove. When she returned, Porter was staring at the horizon, lost in thought. "Something about that Hayes fellow nags at me," he said as Grace handed him a cup. "Like I've seen him before, but can't place where." Grace sat in the other chair, cradling her own cup. "He seems to know a great deal about Warren Blackwood." Porter's eyes sharpened. "Has he said something specific?" "No," Grace admitted. Just a feeling I have. The sheriff sipped his coffee, grimacing at the bitterness. Grace hadn't had real coffee in months, making do with chicory and whatever else she could afford. Warren came to see me this morning, Porter said finally. Claims Hayes has been trespassing onto his property watching the store at night. Is that why you're really here to warn me away from him? Porter set his cup down. I'm here because I've known you since you and Thomas arrived in Willow Creek. I wasn't much help when he died. You weren't any help, Grace corrected, old anger surfacing. Porter accepted the rebuke with a nod. I should have done more. The town should have done more. But Warren Blackwood holds too many debts, knows too many secrets, including yours. The sheriff's silence was answer enough. Grace leaned forward. What do you know about Warren that you're not saying? Sheriff Porter stared into his coffee as if reading omens in the grounds. Just be careful, Grace. If Hayes is who I think he might be, he's dangerous in ways you can't imagine. You haven't answered my question. Porter stood, placing his hat back on his gray head. Some questions are better left unasked, especially in a town as small as Willow Creek, where everyone's fate is tangled together like roots of an old tree. He walked to the edge of the porch, then turned back. Lock your door tonight, Grace, and if Hayes comes around, send him away. For your own sake. Grace watched the sheriff disappear down the path, his shoulders bent as if carrying a heavy burden. She'd never quite trusted Sherman Porter. He'd been too complacent during Thomas's financial troubles, too willing to look the other way when Warren's business practices skirted the law. But something in his warning rang true. Ethan Hayes was dangerous. The question was to whom? As if summoned by her thoughts, a figure emerged from the gathering shadows. Ethan walked toward the cabin, his stride purposeful but unhurried. He carried a canvas sack over one shoulder. Sheriff Porter seemed concerned, Ethan said by way of greeting, stopping at the foot of the porch steps. Were you watching us? Grace asked, unsettled by his sudden appearance. Watching the road, Ethan corrected. Warren Blackwood left town an hour ago, headed west. Thought you should know. Relief and wariness warred within Grace. Thank you, though I don't understand why you're so interested in Warren's movements or in helping me. Ethan set down a sack. May I? He asked, gesturing to the vacant chair. Grace nodded, curiosity overcoming caution. Ethan sat, placing his hat on his knee, revealing close-cropped dark hair threaded with gray at the temples. Without the hat's shadow, his face seemed younger, the lines around his eyes more from squinting in the sun than from age. I brought some things for your garden, he said, indicating the sack. Tools, mostly. Your trowel looked about ready to break. You didn't answer my question, Grace pressed. Ethan's gaze met hers directly. No, I didn't. They sat in silence for a moment, the tension between them not entirely uncomfortable. A whip-poor will called from the junipers, its melancholy cry echoing in the stillness. The war has been over for 7 years. Grace said suddenly, but you still can't sleep, can you? Surprise flickered across Ethan's face. How did you know I was a battlefield nurse? I've seen that look hundreds of times. Grace studied him with professional detachment. You see them in your dreams, don't you? The men you couldn't save, or perhaps the ones you killed. Every night Ethan admitted the words seeming to escape against his will. I see, Thomas, Grace said softly. Not just in dreams. Sometimes I think I catch glimpses of him in the corner of my eye, or hear him moving about the cabin at night. She gave a small, sad smile. Perhaps I am going mad, as some in town whisper. You're not mad, Ethan said. Just haunted like me, whom the simple acknowledgement of their shared burden created a connection deeper than words could express. They sat together as darkness claimed the land. Two souls adrift in a sea of memories, finding momentary anchorage in each other's presence. I should go, Ethan said eventually, rising and placing his hat back on his head. Lock your door, as the sheriff suggested. Why, Crabomb, Grace asked. What do you know that I don't? Ethan hesitated, clearly weighing how much to reveal. Warren Blackwood isn't just a storekeeper with questionable business practices. He's involved in things that would turn your stomach. What things? It's better you don't know the details. Grace stood, anger flaring suddenly. Don't treat me like a child, Ethan. I've seen men with their insides spilling out onto field hospital floors. I've amputated limbs and written letters home to mothers whose sons died screaming for them. Whatever Warren is involved in, I can bear to hear it. Ethan studied her, reassessing. He's part of a network that traffics young women to mining camps and frontier towns. They target vulnerable women, widows without family connections, girls who've lost their parents, women fleeing abusive situations. They offer help create debts that can never be repaid, then force the women into prostitution. Grace felt the blood drain from her face. And you think he intends that for me? I think you've resisted longer than most, which has made you a challenge. Men like Warren enjoy breaking strong spirits. Ethan's voice hardened. That's why I intervened the other night and why I've stayed close. You're a lawman then? Grace asked. Not officially. Ethan's expression closed again. I work with a federal marshal, sometimes tracking men like Warren and his associates. That's why your sister said you were supposed to be watching Warren, not helping me. A flicker of surprise crossed Ethan's face. You heard that I did. Grace crossed her arms. So all of this, the firewood, fixing my roof, helping with the garden, it's just a cover for your real purpose here. Ethan's jaw tightened. It started that way, but not anymore. What does that mean? It means I've compromised my mission by getting involved with you, Ethan said bluntly. It means I should walk away right now and focus on gathering evidence against Warren. But I won't, because I can't stand by and watch him hurt you. The raw honesty in his voice stripped away Grace's anger, leaving confusion in its wake. Why do you care what happens to me? I'm nothing to you. Ethan took a step closer, close enough that Grace could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. You remind me of someone I used to be. Someone who believed in healing instead of hurting. Someone who saw value in life rather than ways to end it. He gestured toward the medical kit on her shelf, visible through the open door. You've stopped using your gift just as I've corrupted mine. Maybe that's why I can't walk away. Maybe I'm hoping that by helping you find your way back, I'll find my own. The vulnerability in his admission left Grace speechless. Before she could formulate a response, Ethan stepped back, the moment broken. Lock your door, he repeated. I'll be nearby if you need me. He melted into the darkness, leaving Grace standing on her porch, her heart racing with emotions she couldn't name or didn't dare to. Behind her, through the cabin window, the silver gleam of her medical kit caught the last light of day. A silent reminder of the healer she had once been, and perhaps, with Ethan's help, might become again. The following day settled into an uneasy rhythm. Grace worked in her garden each morning, coaxing life from soil that had lain dormant too long. Ethan continued his odd jobs around town, maintaining his cover while keeping a watchful eye on Warren Blackwood's movements. They seldom spoke when others were present, yet Grace would often find him at her garden in the evenings, silently working alongside her until dusk claimed the light. Warren returned to town 2 days after his mysterious departure, his mood darker than before. He watched Grace from his store window when she came to town, his gaze calculating and cold. When their paths crossed, he tipped his hat with mocking courtesy, his smile never reaching his eyes. Your protector won't always be around, he said one afternoon as Grace passed the store. We have unfinished business, you and I. Grace didn't respond, but her heart hammered against her ribs as she hurried away. Warren's threats were no longer just about debt or desire. There was something more malevolent in his attention now, as if her continued defiance had awakened something truly dangerous. A week after Abigail's arrival, Grace woke to the soft sound of piano music drifting through her open window. The melody was haunting melancholy, a piece she recognized from before the war, a nocturne that Thomas had particularly loved. She lay still, wondering if she was dreaming. The music continued, faint but unmistakable, coming from the direction of the abandoned church. Grace rose and dressed quickly, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders against the pre-dawn chill. She followed the music like a siren's call, drawn by its beauty and the mystery of who could be playing in a town that had no working piano. The church stood silhouetted against the lightening sky, its broken steeple reaching toward heaven like a gnarled finger. The music grew louder as Grace approached, floating through the shattered windows. She hesitated at the weathered doors, suddenly fearful of what she might find inside. Taking a deep breath, she pushed one door open. It creaked in protest, the sound momentarily drowning out the music. When the door settled, the playing continued, uninterrupted. The church's interior was bathed in the soft glow of a single lantern. Dust motes danced in the beam of light that fell across the old upright piano tucked into the corner. And sitting at the instrument, his back to the door, was Ethan Hayes. His fingers moved over the yellowed keys with practiced ease, drawing forth music that seemed to fill the empty building with ghosts of congregants long gone. His head was bowed, eyes closed, lost in the melody as if in prayer. Grace stood transfixed, unable to move or speak. This was a side of Ethan she hadn't imagined, the hardened man with scarred hands creating something so beautiful it brought tears to her eyes. The final notes lingered in the air, fading slowly into silence. Only then did Ethan sense her presence, turning with the alertness of a man accustomed to danger. "I didn't mean to intrude," Grace said softly. Ethan's expression was unreadable in the dim light. "I couldn't sleep. You never do." He smiled faintly at that, acknowledging the truth of her observation. "The piano helps. Sometimes gives my hand something to do besides hold a weapon." Grace moved closer, stepping carefully around debris littering the floor. "I didn't know there was a piano here. Most don't. It's hidden behind the pulpit, hasn't been tuned in years, but it still has a voice." Ethan ran his fingers over the keys without pressing them. "Like some people I know." The reference wasn't lost on Grace. She had been silent too long, her own voice as a healer, as a woman muted by grief and isolation. "Where did you learn to play?" she asked, sitting beside him on the worn bench. "My mother taught me." Before the war, Ethan's expression softened with memory. She believed music civilized the soul. Said a man who could create beauty would think twice before destroying it. She was wise. She was wrong. Ethan's hand stilled on the keys. "I played this same nocturne the night before Gettysburg. The next day, I killed 17 men." The starkness of his confession hung in the air between them. Grace had tended the wounded from that battle, had seen the aftermath of the bloodiest days of the war. She knew what men were capable of, both the horror and the heroism. "The world isn't divided into good men and bad men," she said finally. "Just men who make choices moment by moment, sometimes terrible ones." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing past the widow's garb to the woman beneath. "Is that what you told yourself in the field hospitals when you couldn't save them all?" "I told myself that doing something, however small, was better than doing nothing." Grace's hand moved to cover his on the keys, a healer's instinct to comfort pain. "That's what you're doing now, isn't it? Something, however small, against men like Warren." Ethan didn't pull away from her touch. "It never feels like enough." "It never is," Grace agreed, "but it's still worth doing." They sat in silence as dawn light began to filter through the broken windows, casting patterns across the dusty floor. In that moment, something shifted between them, a recognition of shared purpose, shared pain, and perhaps something more that neither dared name. "Play something else," Grace said, breaking the silence. "Something hopeful this time." Ethan obliged his fingers, finding a lighter melody, something that spoke of sunrise and new beginnings. As the music filled the abandoned church, Grace closed her eyes and allowed herself to truly feel for the first time since Thomas's death. Not just grief, but the full spectrum of emotion that she had denied herself for so long. When the last notes faded, she opened her eyes to find Ethan watching her, an unasked question in his gaze. "We should go," he said, though he made no move to rise. "People will be stirring soon." Grace nodded, reluctant to break the spell of the moment, but aware of the town's tendency toward gossip. Being found alone with Ethan in the old church before dawn would feed rumors neither of them needed. As they walked back toward her cabin, the eastern sky blooming with color, Grace asked the question that had been nagging at her since she'd discovered him playing. "You're the ghost of the church, aren't you? The one people have been whispering about for the past week." Ethan's mouth quirked in a half-smile. Suppose I am. Why play there? Why not somewhere more private? Churches have good acoustics. His smile faded, and I needed somewhere to think. Somewhere I might be closer to understanding. Understanding what Ethan stopped walking, turning to face her fully. Why I can't walk away from Willow Creek. From this mission. His gaze held hers. From you. The honesty in his voice stole Grace's breath. Before she could respond, hoofbeats wheezed on the road, breaking the moment. They stepped apart as a rider approached Jim Miller, the elderly storekeeper who doubled as the town's postmaster. Mrs. Whitley, he called, reining in his horse. Telegram came from Mr. Hayes yesterday. Been looking all over for him. He squinted at Ethan suspiciously. Found you at last, I see. Ethan took the folded paper, slipping it into his pocket without reading it. Appreciate the delivery. Miller's gaze shifted between them, taking in their proximity in the early hour. His lips pursed in disapproval. Sheriff Porter's looking for you too, Hayes. Says it's urgent. I'll find him, Ethan said dismissively. Miller hesitated, clearly wanting to say more than thought better of it. With a final judgmental glance at Grace, he turned his horse and rode back toward town. Looks like our secret morning is no longer secret, Grace observed. I need to read this, Ethan said, patting his pocket, and speak with the sheriff. Will you be all right? Grace straightened her spine. I survived 2 years in Willow Creek before you arrived, Mr. Hayes. I think I can manage a morning without your protection. A flash of admiration crossed Ethan's face. I never doubted it, Mrs. Whitley. He tipped his hat and strode away, his long legs eating up the distance. Grace watched him go. Her fingers unconsciously touching the spot on the piano bench where they had sat together shoulder to shoulder in a moment of peace that already felt like a dream. Ethan found Sheriff Porter at his office boots, propped on his desk, nursing a cup of coffee that smelled liberally laced with whiskey despite the early hour. The old lawman didn't seem surprised to see him. Figured you'd turn up eventually, Porter said, not bothering to rise. Heard you've been getting friendly with Grace Whitley. Ethan remained standing, hat in hand, his posture deceptively relaxed. Jim Miller's been busy spreading the news. Small town, nothing stays secret for long. Porter took another sip of his coffee. That's why I'm wondering what a man with your particular history is doing in Willow Creek. Just passing through, Ethan said, the lie easy on his tongue after years of practice. Needed work, found some here. Porter's roomy eyes narrowed. You expecting me to believe that Sergeant Hayes' the use of his military rank sent a jolt through Ethan? He kept his expression neutral, though his mind raced. How did Porter know his service records were sealed, his activities since the war deliberately obscured? Don't know what you're talking about. Sheriff Porter snorted. Save it, son. I was at Chancellorsville. Saw you leading a charge that should have gotten your whole company killed. Instead, you brought most of them back alive. He leaned forward, setting down his cup. Never forget a face, especially not one that looked like yours that day, like you'd made a pact with the devil and just realized the cost. Ethan remained silent, unwilling to confirm or deny. Porter was fishing, but with surprisingly accurate bait. Here's what I can't figure, Porter continued. Why would a decorated Union officer who disappeared after Gettysburg turn up in my town 7 years later, taking an unusual interest in both Warren Blackwood and a Confederate widow? Perhaps you're confusing me with someone else? I don't think so. Porter stood, moving to the window to peer out at the awakening town. See, I started asking questions after you showed up. Sent some telegrams, got some interesting replies. Ethan's hands drifted toward the knife at his belt, a motion so subtle most wouldn't notice. But Porter was no ordinary lawman. Ease your hand away from that blade, son. I'm not your enemy. Porter turned back to face him. Though I'm not entirely sure I'm your friend either. That depends on why you're really here. Ethan weighed his options. Porter clearly knew something of his past, but how much and where did the sheriff's loyalties truly lie in Willow Creek? With the law? Or with Warren Blackwood? The telegram in Ethan's pocket suddenly felt heavy, unread, but potentially crucial. He needed time to assess this new development. Like I said, just passing through? Ethan repeated, holding Porter's gaze. But I don't like seeing women mistreated. If that puts me at odds with certain people in your town, so be it. Porter studied him for a long moment. Warren Blackwood says you've been watching his store at night, says you're making his customers nervous. Is that a crime? Could be, if I decide it is. Porter sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 60-odd years. Look, Hayes, or whatever you're calling yourself these days. Willow Creek isn't what it once was. The mines played out the creek floods every spring, and half the town is one bad harvest away from starvation. Warren Blackwood holds more mortgages than the bank. He's not a good man, but he's a necessary one. Necessary for what? Survival? Porter's voice hardened. So whatever business you have with him, conclude it and move on before things get complicated. Things are already complicated, Ethan observed, especially for Grace Whitley. A flash of genuine concern crossed Porter's weathered face. Grace is a good woman who's had more than her share of hardship. That's why I'm warning you, if your presence brings her more trouble, I'll run you out of Willow Creek myself. The threat was clear, but Ethan sensed something beneath it. Not hostility, but a grudging respect. Soldier to soldier. I have no intention of bringing Grace trouble. Ethan said truthfully, just the opposite. Porter held his gaze for a moment longer, then nodded once, a gesture of temporary truce. See that you don't. Now, if there's nothing else, I've got rounds to make. Ethan left the sheriff's office with more questions than answers. How much did Porter really know about his past? And more importantly, where would the sheriff stand when the truth about Warren Blackwood finally came to light? Finding a quiet spot behind the livery stable, Ethan finally opened the telegram. The message was brief but urgent. Blackwood brother arriving Willow Creek, stop. Evidence suggests larger operation than suspected. Stop. Maintain distance from Widow Stop. Shun son. Ethan crumpled the paper in his fist. The marshal's instructions were clear. Stay away from Grace to avoid compromising the investigation. But the warning came too late. Ethan was already far more involved than he should be. His judgment clouded by feelings he hadn't experienced since before the war. He smoothed the telegram and read it again, focusing on the first line. Marcus Blackwood was coming to Willow Creek. The implication sent a chill down Ethan's spine. If the brothers were meeting, something significant was in motion, likely the shipment Abigail had mentioned, which meant Grace was in more danger than ever. Marcus Blackwood was known to personally evaluate potential women for their operation. If Warren had identified Grace as a target, his brother's arrival could accelerate their timetable. Ethan needed to warn her despite Colin's instructions. But first, he needed more information, and there was only one place in town likely to have it. Grace was hanging laundry when Abigail Hayes appeared at the edge of her property, striding purposefully toward her with the confident gait of someone used to making her own path in the world. We need to talk, Abigail announced without preamble, stopping a few feet away. About my brother, Grace continued, pinning a sheet to the line, outwardly calm, despite her racing heart. I wasn't aware Ethan required a spokesperson. A flicker of admiration crossed Abigail's face. He doesn't, but he's not thinking clearly where you're concerned, and that makes him dangerous to himself and to you. Grace turned to face the younger woman fully. Why don't you say what you really came to say, Ms. Hayes? Abigail crossed her arms. Fine, stay away from my brother. He won't walk away from you, so you need to walk away from him. I didn't ask Ethan for his help or his company. Doesn't matter. He's decided you need protecting. And once Ethan makes up his mind about something, he's as stubborn as a mule with a toothache. Abigail's expression softened fractionally. It's going to get him killed one day. The genuine concern in her voice caught Grace off guard. You really believe he's in danger because of me? I know it. Abigail glanced toward town, then back at Grace. Look, I don't have anything against you personally. You seem decent enough, but Ethan's mission here is bigger than one widow's troubles. His mission to bring down Warren Blackwood. You mean? Abigail's eyes widened slightly. He told you my magic. Enough? Grace unpinned the last of her laundry, buying time to order her thoughts, though I suspect there's much more he hasn't said. Abigail studied her with new interest. He doesn't usually reveal even that much. Then perhaps he had good reason to trust me. Grace folded the damp sheet carefully, just as perhaps you should trust his judgment where I'm concerned. It's not a matter of trust. Abigail's voice lowered. Has he told you about Carson's Valley, about Judge Roland? Grace shook her head. A year ago, Ethan was investigating a trafficking ring operating out of Carson's Valley. The local judge, Roland, was protecting the men behind it. Ethan discovered the judge was also personally abusing some of the girls. Abigail's expression darkened with memory. One night, the judge attacked a girl who couldn't have been more than 15. Ethan intervened. There was a fight. The judge pulled a gun, and Ethan killed him. Grace finished the scenario, all too easy to imagine. No, Abigail said, surprising her. Ethan disarmed him, beat him unconscious, and left him alive. But someone else killed the judge later that same night, shot him point blank while he slept in his jail cell, who we never found out. But Ethan was blamed. There was a warrant, a manhunt. He barely escaped with his life. Abigail's gaze bore into Grace. That's why I'm asking you to stay away from him. He's still wanted for that murder in some territories. If his true identity becomes known here, if the wrong people connect him to Carson's Valley, he'll hang. The revelation settled heavy in Grace's stomach. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand what's at stake. Abigail stepped closer. Warren Blackwood isn't just some small-town bully. He's part of a network that stretches across 3 territories. His brother Marcus is even worse, a man who's killed witnesses, lawmen, anyone who threatens their operation. Grace felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. And you think they've targeted me? I think Warren has been watching you since your husband died, waiting for the right moment. I think your continued resistance has made you a challenge when he's determined to break. Abigail's voice gentled. And I think my brother sees in you a chance for redemption he doesn't deserve and won't find. The blunt assessment struck Grace like a physical blow. Was that all she was to Ethan? A means of atonement for his past? I appreciate your candor, Miss Hayes, Grace said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. But I don't believe Ethan's intentions are as calculated as you suggest. Abigail sighed, frustration evident in every line of her body. You're both stubborn fools. Just remember, I warned you when everything falls apart. She turned to go, then paused. One more thing. If you truly care for my brother's welfare, don't mention our conversation. And if you hear the name Eliza, don't ask about her. Some wounds never heal, no matter how skilled the nurse. With that cryptic statement, Abigail strode away, leaving Grace with a basket of damp laundry and a mind full of troubling questions. Who was Eliza? What had happened in Carson's Valley that still haunted Ethan? And most pressingly, what would Warren Blackwood do when his brother arrived in Willow Creek? Grace resumed hanging her laundry, but her thoughts were elsewhere, on a man whose scars ran deeper than she'd imagined, and whose past contained shadows darker than any she had glimpsed. The brothel at the edge of town didn't officially exist. The weathered 2-story house with peeling blue paint called itself a boarding house, and the women who lived there were referred to as seamstresses or entertainers in polite company. Sheriff Porter collected a monthly fee to ensure it remained undisturbed, and the town's menfolk pretended their visits were for completely innocent purposes. Ethan had avoided the place until now, not wanting to draw attention or establish patterns that might alert Warren to his true purpose in Willow Creek. But with Marcus Blackwood's imminent arrival, he needed information that could only be found where men spoke freely in their cups and in the company of women paid to listen. The madam, a woman who called herself Duchess, despite her distinctly non-aristocratic Missouri accent, eyed Ethan with professional assessment as he entered the parlor. Well, well, she drawled, fanning herself languidly. The mysterious Mr. Hayes finally graces us with his presence. The girls have been placing bets on when you'd visit. Ethan removed his hat but remained near the door. The room was heavy with perfume and the sour smell of spilled whiskey. 3 girls lounged on settees dressed in garish silks that had seen better days. A piano player in the corner picked out a half-hearted tune. I'm looking for information, not company, Ethan said quietly. Duchess raised a penciled eyebrow. Information costs more than company in my establishment, Mr. Hayes. Ethan produced a gold coin, one of his last, and placed it on a nearby table. I need to know about Warren Blackwood's business associates, particularly those from out of town. The madam's eyes narrowed at the coin. That buys you 15 minutes in the back parlor with Lily. She hears things especially from Warren. He talks too much when he's in his cups. She gestured toward a door beyond the piano. Ethan followed, hyper-aware of eyes tracking his movement, both the girls and those of the two customers pretending to read newspapers in the corner. The back parlor was smaller, furnished with a worn sofa and 2 chairs. A young woman with tired eyes and faded blonde hair waited, her smile practiced but empty. "Lily, this gentleman wants to talk," Duchess announced. "Just talk, mind you. 15 minutes. When they were alone, Lily's professional demeanor slipped slightly. She sank onto the sofa, tucking her feet beneath her like a child. "So you're the one Warren's been cursing about," she said, studying Ethan with genuine curiosity. "The one who stopped him from dragging the widow home." Ethan remained standing. "I need information about Warren's brother Marcus." Lily's expression changed, fear flashing across her features before she controlled it. "I don't know anyone by that name." "Yes, you do." Ethan kept his voice gentle despite the urgency pressing on him. "And you're afraid of him. All of you are." Lily glanced toward the door, then leaned forward, lowering her voice. "What's it worth to you? What do you want to buy, ma'am? Passage out of Willow Creek?" Her mask dropped completely, revealing a desperation that twisted Ethan's gut. "For me and 2 others. Before he comes." "Marcus is coming here?" Ethan asked, though he already knew the answer. Lily nodded, which Warren's been preparing for weeks, cleaning the house next door, ordering special liquor, having new dresses made for certain girls. Her hands twisted in her lap. "The ones he's giving to Marcus. Giving home as gifts or samples of the merchandise." Lily's voice dropped even lower. "When Marcus comes, girls disappear. They're sent to mining camps or worse places farther west. They never come back." Cold fury settled in Ethan's chest. "When is he arriving tomorrow on the afternoon stage?" Lily's eyes pleaded with him. "Can you help us, please?" Ethan considered his options. Helping Lily and the others escape would alert Warren that someone knew about Marcus's arrival. It might drive the brothers underground before Ethan could gather the evidence Marshal Collins needed to bring down their entire operation. But looking at Lily's face, young despite her hard life, still capable of hope, Ethan couldn't bring himself to use her as bait, no matter how worthy the larger cause. "Pack only what you can carry," he said, making his decision. "Be ready tonight after midnight. I'll have horses waiting behind the livery stable." Relief flooded Lily's features. "Thank you, The door opened abruptly, cutting off her words. Duchess stood there, her expression carefully blank. "Time's up," she announced. "And you have another visitor, Lily. An important one." Behind the Madame Warren, Blackwood's heavy frame filled the doorway. His eyes narrowed at the sight of Ethan. "Well, well," he said, his voice falsely jovial. "If it isn't the widow's protector. Seems your tastes are more varied than the town's suspected haze." Ethan retrieved his hat from the table, nodding politely to Lily. "Just having a friendly conversation. I'll boo you on my way." Warren didn't move from the doorway. "Funny place for conversation. Almost like you were looking for specific information." The implied threat hung in the air. Ethan maintained his casual posture, though every sense was alert for danger. He'd noted 2 men with Warren, probably armed, definitely loyal to their employer. "Just getting to know the town better," Ethan said easily. "Duchess has been most accommodating." The madam's face remained impassive, but Ethan caught the flicker of fear in her eyes. She, like Lily, was afraid of what Warren might do if crossed. "Willow Creek has many secrets," Warren said, finally stepping aside to let Ethan pass. "Not all of them welcome outsiders poking around. Remember that, Hayes." Ethan moved past him, careful not to brush against the larger man. "I always respect local customs, Mr. Blackwood, until they conflict with basic human decency." Warren's false smile tightened. "Decency is a luxury for those who can afford it. The rest of us steal in reality. I've found reality has a way of catching up with men who believe themselves above it," Ethan replied, pausing at the outer door. "Give my regards to your brother when he arrives." He didn't wait to see Warren's reaction, but he felt the man's stare burning into his back as he walked away. The encounter had confirmed his suspicions while raising the stakes considerably. Warren now knew that Ethan was aware of Marcus's impending arrival. Whatever element of surprise Ethan might have had was gone. which meant Grace was in more danger than ever. Oh no. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the cabin walls. Grace sat in her rocking chair, mending one of her faded dresses by the light of a single oil lamp. Outside, the night was unusually still, the silence broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl hunting in the juniper grove. She'd been waiting for Ethan since sunset, a growing unease settling in her bones as the hours passed with no sign of him. Their morning conversation at the church seemed a lifetime ago, overshadowed by Abigail's revelations and the weight of unspoken truths between them. A soft knock at the door broke her reverie. Grace set aside her mending and moved cautiously to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. Ethan stood on the porch, his tall frame silhouetted against the night sky. Something in his posture attention. A wariness sent a warning through her. "It's open?" she called, stepping back. Ethan entered quickly, scanning the cabin's interior before closing the door behind him. His face was grim, his movements those of a man expecting trouble. "You shouldn't leave your door unlocked," he said, removing his hat. "I was expecting you." Grace returned to her chair, gesturing for him to take the seat opposite. Though later than this, Ethan remained standing, too restless to sit. "You need to leave Willow Creek." Tonight, the bluntness of his statement took Grace by surprise. Why quo Warren's brother Marcus is arriving tomorrow. He's worse than Warren, violent, unpredictable, with a particular interest in women who resist his brother's advances. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You're not safe here anymore." Grace absorbed this information, connecting it with what Abigail had told her earlier. "And where would I go? I have no family, no friends outside Willow Creek. This cabin, this land, it's all I have left." "You have your life," Ethan countered. "Everything else can be rebuilt." Easy for a drifter to say. The words came out sharper than Grace intended. "You're used to leaving places behind." "I'm not." Ethan flinched as if struck. "This isn't about what's easy. It's about keeping you alive." Grace stood, moving to the fireplace. She stared into the flames, gathering her thoughts. "Your sister visited me today." Ethan stilled. "Abigail, what did she want?" "To warn me away from you." Grace turned to face him. "She told me about Carson's Valley, about Judge Rowland." A muscle ticked in Ethan's jaw. "Did she tell you I didn't kill him?" "Yes, but she said you're still wanted for his murder, that you barely escaped with your life." Grace took a step toward him. "Why didn't you tell me it wasn't relevant to your situation? Wasn't it a man with a price on his head inserting himself into my life, drawing attention that could endanger us both?" Grace shook her head. "That seems quite relevant, Ethan." He had the grace to look abashed. "I should have told you, but I was afraid you'd send me away. If you knew the truth." "What is the truth?" Grace asked softly. "Not just about Carson's Valley, but about why you're really here, why you chose to help me specifically." Ethan's gaze met hers, steady despite the vulnerability in his expression. "I told you before, I work with a federal marshal tracking men like the Blackwoods. I came to Willow Creek to gather evidence against Warren, nothing more. And yet you risked that mission to help me. Why? Because I couldn't stand by and watch him hurt you." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of agitation. "I've seen too many women suffer at the hands of men like Warren. I've buried too many I couldn't save, including Eliza Grace." Thought, remembering Abigail's warning not to mention the name. Aloud, she asked, "Is that all I am to you, another woman to save a chance for redemption?" Ethan crossed the room in 2 strides, stopping just short of touching her. "No, God, no." His voice roughened with emotion. "You're the first person since the war who's made me feel something other than anger or guilt. When I'm with you, I remember there's more to life than vengeance." The raw honesty in his voice stripped away Grace's defenses. She reached up her fingers, lightly tracing the scar along his jaw. "Then trust me enough to let me make my own choice. I won't run from Warren or his brother. This is my home." Ethan caught her hand, holding it against his cheek. "They'll kill you, Grace, or worse. Not if we stop them first." Determination hardened her voice. "You came here to gather evidence against Warren, so let's gather it together." Ethan stared at her, conflict evident in his eyes. "It's too dangerous. Life is dangerous, Grace countered. I learned that in field hospitals, watching boys younger than Lily die screaming for their mothers. Ethan's eyebrows rose. You know about Lily. I know about all of Warren's seamstresses. I may have withdrawn from town life, but I'm not blind. Grace's expression softened. I also know you plan to help some of them escape tonight. That's where you've been, isn't it? Ethan nodded, surprised again by her perception. 3 of them, Lily and 2 others, warned plans to give to Marcus's samples. Then go. Help them. Grace stepped back, breaking their physical connection, but maintaining the deeper one that had formed between them. But come back afterward. We have plans to make. Ethan studied her face, searching for any sign of fear or doubt. Finding none, he nodded slowly. I'll return before dawn. Lock the door behind me. Grace followed him to the threshold. Be careful, Ethan. Warren will be looking for any excuse to be rid of you before his brother arrives. I'm always careful. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. It's how I've survived this long. After he disappeared into the darkness, Grace secured the door as promised. But instead of returning to her mending, she moved to the shelf where her medical kit had gathered dust for 2 years. The wooden box was worn at the edges, the brass hinges tarnished from neglect. She ran her fingers over the lid, remembering the last time she had opened it, the day they brought Thomas's body back from the flood. With a deep breath, Grace lifted the box and placed it on the table. Inside, her instruments lay in their felt-lined compartments. Scalpels, forceps needles, and thread for suturing. A small bottle of laudanum, half empty. Rolls of clean bandages. All the tools of her former calling, preserved as if waiting for her return. Grace removed each item, cleaning it meticulously. If she was to stand against the Blackwoods, she would need every skill, every strength she possessed, including the one she had abandoned in grief. It was time for Grace Whitley, battlefield nurse, to resurrect herself from the ashes of mourning. Not just for Ethan's sake, or even for Lily and the other women, but for her own. As she worked, memories of Thomas mingled with fresher images of Ethan at the piano, his scarred hands creating beauty from broken keys. 2 men so different yet connected by the thread of her life. One taken by water, one forged in fire. For the first time, Grace allowed herself to acknowledge the feelings growing within her for Ethan Hayes, not as a betrayal of Thomas's memory, but as proof that her heart, like her healing hands, could be reclaimed from the dust of grief. By the time she finished cleaning her instruments, the eastern sky had begun to lighten. Dawn was approaching, bringing with it Marcus Blackwood and whatever darkness followed in his wake. But Grace would be ready, and she would not face it alone. The livery stable stood dark and quiet as Ethan led 3 horses around to its rear. Lily and the other 2 women, barely more than girls, really waited in the shadows, each clutching a small bundle of possessions. Their faces were pale in the moonlight, a mixture of fear and desperate hope. The horses know the trail, Ethan explained in a low voice, helping the youngest. Hannah, she'd said her name, was into the saddle. Head east until you reach Taylor's Ridge. My sister Abigail is staying at the hotel there. Tell her I sent you. She'll help you get farther east, maybe all the way to St. Louis. Lily, more experienced than the others, swung into her saddle with practiced ease. What about you? Warren will know you helped us. He'll come after you. Let him try. Ethan handed her a small pouch of coins. This should get you as far as Denver if necessary. Stay together, travel only by day, and avoid the main roads when you can. The 3rd woman, Rose, had said nothing since they'd met behind the brothel. Now she looked down at Ethan, her dark eyes haunted. Why are you helping us? What do you want in return? It was the question every woman in her position had been conditioned to ask. Nothing came without a price, especially not from men. I want you to live, Ethan said simply, to find something better than Willow Creek. Rose studied him a moment longer, then nodded, accepting his answer. We should go, Lily urged, glancing nervously toward town. Duchess usually checks our rooms at dawn. Ethan stepped back, slapping the lead horse's flank gently. Go and don't look back. The women rode off into the night, 3 shadows against the starlit landscape. Ethan watched until they disappeared over the first rise, hoping he'd done the right thing. Marshal Collins would disapprove. The women could have provided testimony against the Blackwoods, But Ethan had seen too many witnesses die waiting for justice that never came. Some lives had to be saved now, not promised a better future that might never arrive. As he turned to leave, a voice spoke from the darkness nearby. That was either very noble or very foolish. Sheriff Porter stepped into view, his badge catching the moonlight. His revolver remained holstered, but his hand rested near it. Ethan tensed, calculating his chances if the situation turned violent. Those women deserved better than what Warren had planned for them. Maybe so, Porter sighed heavily. But you've just made my job a whole lot harder, son. How long have you known what goes on at the boarding house? Ethan asked, unable to keep the accusation from his voice. Porter didn't flinch from the question. Long enough to know I can't stop it alone. Warren owns half the town council and has friends in the territorial capital. I look the other way on some things so I can keep order on others. And that lets you sleep at night. Nothing lets me sleep at night, Porter replied at an echo of Ethan's own insomnia in his voice. Not since Fredericksburg. I reckon you understand that better than most. The shared reference to battle created a momentary bond between the men, soldier to soldier, across the divide of years and conflicts. Warren's brother arrives tomorrow, Ethan said, watching Porter's reaction. The sheriff nodded. I know, been dreading it for weeks. You know what they're planning because I have suspicions. Porter leaned against the stable wall, suddenly looking every one of his ears. Marcus Blackwood doesn't come to Willow Creek for social calls. Last time he was here, 2 girls from the brothel disappeared. Time before that, a drifter who asked too many questions was found with his throat cut in the creek. Yet you do nothing. What would you have me do? Arrest him on suspicion. With what evidence? Porter's voice hardened. I'm one old man with a badge nobody respects anymore. The Blackwoods have money connections, men with guns. You think I haven't tried to get help from the federal marshals? They're too busy chasing bank robbers and stagecoach bandits to worry about what happens to a few fallen women in a dying mining town. Ethan studied the older man, reassessing. Perhaps Porter wasn't corrupt so much as defeated, worn down by years of compromise and futility. What if you had evidence? Ethan asked. Proof of the Blackwoods trafficking operation, their connection to Judge Rowland's murder. All of it. Porter straightened, interest sharpening his gaze. Do you have such evidence? Not yet, but I'm close. Ethan took a calculated risk. I need more time, and I need your help protecting Grace Whitley. Grace. Porter frowned. What's she got to do with this? Warren's been trying to force her into debt servitude since her husband died. With Marcus coming, I'm afraid he'll accelerate his plans. Ethan met Porter's gaze directly. I can't be in 2 places at once. I need someone watching her cabin while I gather what I need against the Blackwoods. Porter was silent for a long moment, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. I'll keep an eye on Grace, but you've got until Marcus leaves town to get your evidence. After that, all bets are off. Fair enough. And Hayes. Porter called as Ethan turned to go. If you're playing me, if you've got some personal vendetta against the Blackwoods that puts this town in danger, I'll shoot you myself, war hero or not. Ethan acknowledged the warning with a nod. Just keep Grace safe. That's all I ask. As he walked back toward town, Ethan felt the weight of too many commitments pulling him in different directions. His promise to Marshal Collins to gather evidence without direct intervention. His obligation to the escaped women to cover their tracks. His growing determination to protect Grace at any cost. And beneath it all, the memory of Eliza, whose death had set him on this path years ago. Would she recognize the man he had become? Would she approve of his methods, his compromises, his growing attachment to a widow who represented everything Ethan had denied himself since Gettysburg? The questions had no answers. Only the hollow echo of choices made and paths not taken. Dawn was approaching, bringing with it Marcus Blackwood, and a day that would likely end in blood. Ethan only hoped it wouldn't be Grace's or his own. Dawn broke over Willow Creek with deceptive serenity. Golden light spilled across the weathered buildings, transforming the dying town into something almost beautiful. Grace stood on her porch watching the sunrise with a cup of coffee warming her hands. She'd barely slept, her mind too full of plans and possibilities, fears and hopes. Ethan had not returned before dawn as promised. Grace told herself not to worry. He was capable. Careful had survived worse dangers than Warren Blackwood. Yet anxiety gnawed at her nonetheless, a persistent whisper that everything was about to change, for better or worse. She went inside and changed into her second-best dress, navy blue with small white flowers, one she had rarely worn since Thomas's death. The widow's black she'd worn for 2 years felt suddenly like a costume, a role she'd played long enough. Whatever happened today, she would face it as herself, not as a shadow of grief. Her medical kit sat on the table where she'd left it, instruments clean and organized, ready for use if needed. Grace packed it into a small satchel, along with bandages, laudanum, and a few other necessities. She couldn't say why she felt compelled to bring it into town, only that the instinct was strong, the same instinct that had guided her decisions in field hospitals when there was no time for deliberation. As she secured the cabin and began the walk toward town, Grace felt a strange calm settling over her. The fear remained, but beneath it lay a bedrock of determination. She had survived. The war had stitched men back together, while bullets flew overhead, had endured the crushing loss of her husband and the isolation that followed. She would survive this day as well, whatever it might bring. The town was already stirring when she arrived. Storekeepers opened their doors, children chased each other in the dusty street, women gathered at the well to collect water and exchange morning gossip. On the surface, nothing seemed different yet. Grace sensed an undercurrent of tension, as if the town itself were holding its breath. She passed Warren's store without glancing inside, though she felt his eyes tracking her from the window. At the sheriff's office, she paused, considering whether to seek out Porter. Ethan seemed to believe the old lawman could be trusted at least to some degree. But before she could decide, a familiar figure stepped into view at the end of the street. Ethan walked toward her, his stride purposeful despite obvious fatigue. Relief washed through Grace at the sight of him, followed immediately by concern. He looked as though he hadn't slept at all, his face-drawn eyes shadowed. They met in front of the abandoned church, far enough from curious ears to speak privately. The women Grace asked immediately. On their way to Taylor's Ridge, Ethan replied, his voice low. The gale will help them from there. And Warren doesn't know yet, but he will soon. Ethan glanced toward the livery stable, where activity suggested the morning stage was being prepared. Marcus arrives on the noon stage. Warren's planning some kind of celebration at the brothel tonight. Grace nodded, processing this information. We need evidence of their operation before then. Ethan raised an eyebrow. I thought we agreed you'd stay at your cabin today. No, you suggested it. I made no such promise. Grace met his gaze steadily. I'm tired of hiding, Ethan. Tired of being afraid. Whatever happens today, I want to face it standing, not cowering in my cabin waiting for men to decide my fate. Something like admiration flickered in Ethan's eyes, mingled with exasperation. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. I believe that's what drew you to me in the first place. Grace replied, a hint of a smile curving her lips. Despite the gravity of their situation, Ethan's expression softened. Among other things, he looked around, ensuring they weren't observed, then continued. I spoke with Sheriff Porter last night. He knows more than he's letting on about the Blackwoods, but I think he's more worn down than corrupt. He's agreed to keep an eye on you today. And you trust him to do that? I trust that he's a man looking for redemption before his time runs out. Ethan's voice held understanding rather than judgment. We all seek that in our own ways. Grace thought of her medical kit, cleaned and ready after 2 years of neglect. Yes, we do. They stood in silence for a moment, each lost in thought. The town continued its morning routine around them, oblivious to the currents of danger and decision flowing between them. I need to search Warren's store, Ethan said finally. He keeps a hidden office above it, accessible only through a trap door in the storeroom ceiling. If there's evidence of the trafficking operation, it will be there. How do you know about this hidden room? Lily told me. She's been there. A muscle ticked in Ethan's jaw. Warren uses it for private entertainment sometimes. Grace felt sick at the implication, but forced herself to focus on the practical. He'll be watching for you now, and the store is never empty during business hours. I know. That's why I need a distraction. Ethan's gaze was apologetic. Something significant enough to draw Warren out of the store completely. Understanding dawn. You want me to be that distraction. Only if you're willing, and only if we can ensure your safety. Grace considered the request, weighing the risks against the necessity. What did you have in mind? A medical emergency would be most effective. Something Warren couldn't ignore without damaging his standing in town. Ethan hesitated. Perhaps at the brothel. Several of the women there are genuinely ill consumption, most likely. If one were to take a turn for the worse and conveniently require the only person in town with medical training. Grace finished. It could work, but it would mean revealing that I'm practicing medicine again. Warren might see it as a sign of financial improvement, which could make him more determined to collect what he claims I owe. It's a risk Ethan acknowledged, but it would give me the time I need to search his office. With evidence of the trafficking operation, we could bring charges that would overshadow any debt claims. Grace adjusted the satchel containing her medical kit. Then we have a plan. I'll go to the brothel and offer my services. Once Warren is called over, you'll have your chance. Ethan touched her arm lightly, his expression grave. Be careful if Warren suspects a trap. I've dealt with dangerous men before, Grace reminded him. Not all wounds on the battlefield were from enemy fire. With a final nod of understanding, they parted Grace toward the Blue House at the edge of town, Ethan toward a vantage point where he could observe Warren's store unnoticed. Neither saw the rider who entered town from the east at dusk covered and travel Warren heading straight for the sheriff's office. A rider whose arrival would alter their carefully laid plans in ways neither could anticipate. Duchess was surprised to find Grace Whitley on her doorstep, medical bag in hand, and a determined expression on her face. Well, I never, the madam said, blocking the entrance. What brings the respectable Mrs. Whitley to my humble establishment? I understand you have women here who are ill. Grace replied, keeping her voice even. I'm offering my services as a nurse. Duchess's painted eyebrows rose toward her henned hairline. Since when are you practicing again? Thought you hung up your needles when your husband died. Things change, Grace said simply. May I come in? The madam hesitated, suspicious of this unexpected visit. Don't know if that's wise. Certain people in town might not appreciate your presence here. Warren Blackwood. You mean Grace held the older woman's gaze. I'm not afraid of him anymore, Duchess, and neither should you be. Something in Grace's tone, a quiet authority that brooked no argument, seemed to sway the madam. She stepped aside, allowing Grace to enter. Ruby's the worst, Duchess said, leading Grace through the parlor toward the back stairs. Coughing blood since yesterday. I was going to send for the doctor in Taylor's Ridge, but he charges a fortune just to show his face. The upper floor of the brothel was stifling the air, heavy with the sense of cheap perfume, unwashed bodies, and sickness. Duchess led Grace to a small room at the end of the hall where a young woman lay on a narrow bed, her breathing labored and wheezing. Grace set down her bag and approached the bed. Ruby couldn't have been more than 20, though hard living had aged her prematurely. Her skin was waxy pale, except for 2 bright spots of color high on her cheeks, a classic sign of consumption. How long has she been like this? Grace asked, slipping immediately into her professional role. Coughing for months. The blood started maybe a week ago. Duchess hovered anxiously in the doorway. Can you help her? Grace didn't make promises she couldn't keep. I can make her more comfortable. The rest depends on her constitution and God's will. She opened her bag and set to work examining Ruby with gentle efficiency. The girl was indeed in the advanced stages of consumption, her lungs filled with fluid, body burning with fever. Grace prepared a mixture of laudanum and willow bark to ease the pain and reduce the fever, then showed Duchess how to help Ruby sit up to drain the fluid from her lungs. She needs clean air, sunshine, proper food. Grace said, knowing these were luxuries unavailable in a place like this, and the others should be checked for symptoms. Consumption spreads easily in close quarters. Duchess sighed heavily. Ain't much chance of that. Most of these girls can barely leave their rooms, let alone get countryside air. Because Warren won't allow it? Grace asked carefully, keeping her tone neutral. The madam glanced nervously at the door before replying. Warren and his brother own this place, though you won't find their names on any deed. The girls work off their debts, same as most folks in town. Only their debts never seem to get smaller. It was exactly the confirmation Grace had been seeking, but she kept her expression professionally concerned rather than triumphant. I'd like to examine the other women while I'm here. Preventive care is always better than treatment. I don't know, then. Duchess began, but was interrupted by a commotion from downstairs. Where is she? Pishy Warren's voice boomed, followed by heavy footsteps on the stairs. I was told Grace Whitley came here. Grace exchanged a quick glance with Duchess. It seems Mr. Blackwood has heard of my visit. The madam's face paled beneath her rouge. He won't like this, not today of all days. Let me handle Warren, Grace said, moving toward the door. You stay with Ruby. Remember what I showed you about keeping her upright to breathe. She stepped into the hallway just as Warren reached the top of the stairs, his face flushed with anger. He stopped short at the sight of her, clearly surprised by her calm demeanor. Mrs. Whitley, he said, recovering quickly. This is an unexpected location to find a lady of your standing. Disease doesn't respect social boundaries, Mr. Blackwood. Grace replied coolly. Ruby needs medical attention. So might others here. Warren's eyes narrowed. Since when are you practicing medicine again? Last I heard you could barely afford flour for bread, let alone supplies for doctoring. I still have my training and my instruments. Grace met his gaze without flinching, and unlike some, I believe in helping those in need without charging interest. The barb struck home. Warren's face darkened. You should be careful about making accusations, Mrs. Whitley, especially given your own precarious situation. Are you threatening me, Mr. Blackwood? Grace asked deliberately, raising her voice enough to be heard by the women peeking from doorways along the hall, because that would be most unwise, particularly in front of witnesses. Warren glanced around, noticing for the first time the faces watching their confrontation. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Not at all, simply expressing concern for your welfare. These are difficult times. Indeed they are, Grace agreed. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have patients to attend to. She turned her back on him, a calculated risk, but one she deemed necessary to maintain the upper hand. Behind her, she heard Warren's sharp intake of breath, as if he couldn't quite believe her audacity. This isn't over, he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Not by a long shot. On that we agree. Grace replied without turning around. Warren's footsteps retreated down the stairs, each heavy tread vibrating with suppressed rage. Only when the front door slammed below did Grace allow herself a moment of relief. The distraction had worked. Warren had left his store unattended, giving Ethan the opportunity he needed. Now she could only hope he would find the evidence they sought before Warren returned or before Marcus Blackwood arrived to complicate matters further. Grace spent the next 2 hours examining the brothel's residents, finding 3 more cases of consumption in early stages, as well as various other ailments born of poor nutrition, inadequate hygiene, and the physical demands of their profession. She treated what she could, made notes for supplies she would need to obtain, and promised to return. Throughout it all, she kept one ear attuned to sounds from outside, alert for any indication that Ethan had been discovered or that Marcus had arrived. But the morning passed without incident, the town continuing its drowsy routine under the climbing sun. As midday approached, Grace packed up her medical bag and prepared to leave. She had done all she could for now, both for the women and for Ethan's mission. Duchess saw her to the door, a newfound respect in her heavily lined eyes. You didn't have to come, but you did. These girls won't forget that. I should have come sooner. Grace admitted the weight of her 2-year withdrawal from town life suddenly heavy on her conscience. Sometimes grief makes us blind to others' suffering. The madam nodded, understanding. We all cope as best we can. You planning to start practicing regularly again? Yes, Grace decided in that moment. I think I am. As she stepped onto the porch, Grace spotted Sheriff Porter leaning against a hitching post across the street, ostensibly whittling a piece of wood, but clearly watching the brothel. He nodded slightly in acknowledgement, confirming Ethan's claim that the sheriff had agreed to keep an eye on her. Grace returned the nod and began walking back toward the center of town. The sun was directly overhead now, The noon stage would found arriving soon, bringing Marcus Blackwood and whatever darkness traveled with him. She needed to find Ethan to learn what, if anything, he had discovered in Warren's hidden office. A movement at the edge of her vision caught her attention. A figure stood in the shadow of the alley between the barber shop and the assayer's office. A woman in men's clothing, her posture tense and alert. Abigail Hayes beckoned urgently to Grace, then disappeared deeper into the alley. Glancing around to ensure she wasn't observed, Grace followed. She found Abigail waiting behind the assayer's office, her expression grim. "What are you doing here?" Grace asked. "I thought you were staying in Taylor's Ridge." "I was until your husband showed up this morning." Grace stared at her, certain she had misheard. "My what?" Thomas Whitley, Abigail said impatiently, very much alive and looking for you. The world seemed to tilt beneath Grace's feet. She reached out to steady herself against the wall, her mind struggling to process Abigail's impossible statement. "That's not possible," she whispered. "Thomas drowned. They found his body." "They found a bod, my," Abigail corrected. "Apparently not his." "How do you know this?" "Did you speak to him?" Abigail nodded. "He came to the hotel in Taylor's Ridge asking questions about a widow from Willow Creek who might have passed through. When I heard your name, I introduced myself as a friend, and he claimed to be Thomas Whitley." Grace still couldn't believe it. "My Thomas. He had proof letters from you, a photograph knowledge of things only your husband would know." Abigail's expression softened with uncharacteristic sympathy. "He's riding to Willow Creek as we speak, probably already arrived." Grace's thoughts raced. If Thomas was alive, where had he been for 2 years? Why had he let her believe him dead? And what did his return mean for the feelings that had been growing between her and Ethan? "Does Ethan know?" she asked. "Not yet." "I came straight to find you." Abigail hesitated. "There's more. Your husband says Warren Blackwood tried to kill him that night during the flood. Says he has evidence of Blackwood's criminal activities going back years." This additional revelation sent fresh shockwaves through Grace. Warren tried to murder Thomas. According to him, something about a ledger Thomas found records of the Blackwoods' operation before they expanded west. Abigail placed a hand on Grace's arm. "This changes everything. If Thomas has evidence against the Blackwoods from 2 years ago, then we don't need what Ethan was searching for today." Grace finished her mind clearing despite the emotional turmoil. "We need to find him now." They emerged from the alley in time to see the noon stage rolling into town, raising clouds of dust as it came to a stop before the hotel. Grace scanned the street anxiously, looking for any sign of Thomas or Ethan. Instead, she saw Warren striding purposefully toward the stage, his face set in a welcoming smile that didn't reach his eyes. The stage door opened, and a man stepped down, tall and lean with fair hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore an expensive suit despite the dust of travel, and moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. Marcus. Abigail whispered recognition and loathing in her voice. Grace studied the newcomer, noting the family resemblance to Warren despite the younger Blackwood's more refined appearance. Where Warren was all bluster and crude force, Marcus radiated a colder, more calculated kind of menace. The brothers embraced briefly, exchanging words too low to hear from a distance. Warren gestured toward his store, and the two men began walking in that direction. "We need to warn Ethan," Grace said urgently, "if he's still in Warren's office when they arrive." She didn't need to finish the thought. Abigail was already moving, slipping through the crowd with the ease of someone used to passing unnoticed. Grace followed more slowly, maintaining the appearance of a respectable widow going about her business, while her heart raced with fear for Ethan. Before they could reach the store, however, the sound of raised voices drew their attention to the sheriff's office. A small crowd had gathered, watching some kind of confrontation unfold on the porch. Grace pushed her way forward, Abigail close behind. What she saw stopped her in her tracks. Sheriff Porter stood on the porch, hands raised in a placating gesture. Before him, two men faced each other like wolves circling for a kill. Ethan Hayes and a stranger whose features struck Grace with the force of a physical blow. Thomas, her husband, live and whole, his face thinner than she remembered, but unmistakably his. "Thomas," she whispered, the name foreign on her tongue after so long. He turned at the sound of her voice, his eyes finding hers across the crowded street. For a moment, the world contracted to just the two of them, husband and wife, separated by death and deception, now standing on opposite sides of a dusty road with 2 years of absence between them. "Grace," he said, his voice exactly as she remembered it. Then Ethan stepped between them, his back to Grace, facing Thomas with a tension that suggested violence was only a heartbeat away. "You left her to suffer," Ethan said, each word precise and cutting. "Let her believe you were dead? What kind of man does that to his wife? The kind who was trying to protect her?" Thomas replied, his gaze moving between Ethan and Grace. "And who are you to question my choices? Her neighbor, her friend." His eyes narrowed, or something more. The accusation hung in the air unanswered because there was no simple answer to give. Ethan was more than a neighbor or friend to Grace now, but what exactly had grown between them remained unnamed, unacknowledged. Grace pushed forward, breaking through the final ring of onlookers. "Stop it, both of you." All eyes turned to her, Thomas, Ethan, Sheriff Porter, the gathered townspeople. And from the edge of the crowd, Warren and Marcus Blackwood watched with calculating interest, like predators assessing weakness in their prey. "Grace," Thomas said again, moving toward her. "I can explain everything." "Not here," she replied, acutely aware of the audience. "Not like this." Mai and Ethan remained silent, his face a mask of control that didn't quite hide the storm of emotions beneath. He stepped aside to let Thomas pass, but the set of his shoulders spoke of restraint rather than surrender. Mrs. Whitley, Sheriff Porter, intervened. His weathered face creased with concern. "Perhaps you and your husband would like to use my office for a private conversation." Grace nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Sheriff." As she moved toward the porch, she passed close to Ethan. Their eyes met briefly, a world of unspoken questions and apologies passing between them. "I found it," he murmured, too low for others to hear. "The evidence, it's safe." Relief mingled with the tumult of other emotions churning within her. Whatever else happened today, they had what they needed to bring down the Blackwoods. That, at least, was certain in a world suddenly turned uncertain. Grace followed Thomas and Sheriff Porter into the office. The door closed behind them, shutting out the curious stares and whispered speculations of the townspeople. Outside, she knew Ethan would be watching, waiting, perhaps wondering if her resurrected husband's return meant the end of whatever had been growing between them. And the Blackwood brothers would be plotting their next move, aware that their carefully constructed world was on the verge of collapse. Ethan stood on the boardwalk outside the sheriff's office, every muscle in his body taut with the effort of not following Grace inside. The crowd slowly dispersed, their hunger for drama temporarily satisfied, but not extinguished. They would wait vulture-like for the next act in this unexpected spectacle. Abigail appeared at his side, her expression a mixture of concern and frustration. "I tried to warn you. Grace and I were looking for you when we saw them arguing." "You knew Thomas Whitley was alive?" Ethan asked, his voice carefully controlled. "I met him this morning in Taylor's Ridge. He came looking for Grace." Abigail lowered her voice. "He claims Warren tried to kill him during the flood, says he has evidence against the Blackwoods from 2 years ago. This new information should have been welcome additional ammunition against their enemies." Instead, Ethan felt only a hollow ache in his chest. He had found his own evidence in Warren's hidden office financial records, names, dates, locations of shipments, everything Marshall Collins would need to bring charges. But none of that seemed to matter now, not with Thomas Whitley returned from the dead, and Grace behind that closed door with him. "What will you do?" Abigail asked quietly. Ethan's gaze moved to where the Blackwood brothers stood in conversation across the street, their heads bent together, occasionally glancing toward the sheriff's office. "What I came here to do," he replied, "stop the Blackwoods." After that, he left the sentence unfinished. The future suddenly as blank as a fresh page. Abigail squeezed his arm in a rare gesture of affection. "I'll get the evidence to Marshall Collins. You deal with the Blackwoods." "No," Ethan said firmly. "Stay here, watch over Grace. Whatever Thomas claims, he's been gone for 2 years without a word." That doesn't sit right. And you think she needs protection from her own husband. I think she needs a friend who isn't blinded by history or feelings. Ethan's gaze returned to the sheriff's office door. Someone who sees clearly when others can't. Abigail studied her brother's face, understanding dawning in her eyes. You love her. It wasn't a question, but Ethan answered anyway. Yes, enough to let her go if that's what she wants. The question cut to the heart of his conflict. I want her to be happy, safe. If Thomas can give her that, that's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. Ethan straightened his shoulders. Watch over her, Abby. Please. His sister nodded, accepting his decision even if she didn't agree with it. And where will you be? Ethan's gaze hardened as he looked toward the Blackwood brothers now moving back toward Warren's store, finishing what I started. He walked away without looking back, his path taking him on an intercept course with the Blackwoods. Time for half measures and subtle investigations was over. With Thomas Whitley's return and the evidence Ethan had found, the pieces were in place for a final confrontation. One way or another, it would end today. Inside the sheriff's office, Grace sat across from Thomas, studying the face she had mourned for 2 years. He looked older, with new lines around his eyes and mouth, but his gentle smile was the same as was the nervous habit of running his thumb over his wedding band. Sheriff Porter had discreetly withdrawn to the cells at the back of the building, giving them privacy while remaining within earshot in case of trouble. I thought you were dead, Grace said, finally breaking the silence that had stretched between them. They found a body in the creek. Your clothes, your watch chain. Thomas reached across the desk, his hand stopping just short of touching hers. I know, and I'm so sorry, Grace. Sorry for the pain I caused you for the years we lost. Where have you been? The question emerged sharper than she intended, 2 years of grief and loneliness lending it an edge. Thomas withdrew his hand, accepting her anger as his due. Denver, mostly. Then Kansas City, working, saving, gathering evidence. Evidence of what Warren Blackwood's crimes. Thomas's gentle demeanor hardened. The night of the flood, I wasn't trying to save our mule, Grace. I was meeting an informant, a man who worked for the Blackwoods operation in Denver. He had a ledger, records of their activities over several years. Names, dates, payments. Grace processed this information, connecting it with what she had learned from Ethan. You knew about the trafficking the women. Thomas nodded, pain evident in his expression. I suspected something was wrong long before that night. Warren's prosperity never made sense in a town like Willow Creek. The seamstresses who arrived and disappeared with strange regularity. The special clients who came through and on the stage but never stayed at the hotel. Why didn't you tell me your suspicions? I was trying to protect you. Thomas ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made Grace's heart ache. Warren was already watching us because of my Confederate background. If he thought you knew anything, so instead, you investigated alone. Grace's voice held no accusation, only a growing understanding. And the night of the flood, I met my contact by the creek. He gave me the ledger, but someone must have followed him. There was a shot. Thomas's eyes clouded with memory. The creek was already rising from the rain. When the bullet hit the water beside us, my contact panicked, slipped, and fell in. I went in after him, but the current was too strong. And the body they found is not mine, but he was wearing a coat similar to mine, had my watch chain in his pocket. He had asked to see it earlier, admired the inscription. Thomas looked down at his hands. I was swept nearly 2 miles downstream before I managed to grab onto a tree. By then I could see Warren and 2 other men searching the banks with lanterns. They were looking to finish what they'd started. Grace tried to imagine Thomas's fear and desperation that night alone in the flood-swollen creek with men hunting him. So you let them believe you were dead? He nodded. It seemed the safest choice for both of us. I made my way to Denver, found work under a different name, and began gathering more evidence against the Blackwoods. I always planned to come back for you, Grace. Always. 2 years, Thomas. Grace couldn't keep the hurt from her voice. 2 years without a word, a sign, anything to let me know you were alive. I couldn't risk it. Warren watches everything in this town, mail telegrams, visitors. If he had suspected I survived... Thomas leaned forward, his eyes pleading for understanding. I had to be certain I had enough evidence to destroy him completely before I returned. Enough to ensure your safety. Grace wanted to believe him. Part of her did believe him. Explanation made a certain logical sense, explained the mystery of his disappearance and the body found in the creek. Yet something held her back from complete acceptance, a reservation she couldn't quite name. "What made you return now?" she asked. After all this time, Thomas hesitated just long enough for Grace to note it. I finally had everything I needed. Evidence, witnesses willing to testify, a federal marshal ready to make arrests. But then I heard rumors that Warren was expanding his operation to include Willow Creek itself, that he had his eye on a widow who'd been resisting his advances. His gaze met hers directly. I knew it had to be you. I couldn't wait any longer. A risk plan or no plan. Grace absorbed his words, turning them over in her mind. They aligned with what Ethan had discovered about the Blackwoods' intentions about Marcus's arrival, signaling an acceleration of their plans. "You've spoken with Marshal Collins?" she asked, recalling the name from Ethan's telegram. Thomas's brow furrowed slightly. "How do you know Collins?" "I don't," Grace said carefully. "But I know he's been investigating the Blackwoods for some time. Yes, we've been working together for months." Thomas straightened in his chair. "He should be arriving tomorrow with warrants for both brothers. Tomorrow, too late to prevent whatever the Blackwoods had planned for tonight at the brothel. Too late to protect Lily and the others if Ethan hadn't helped them escape." "The Blackwoods need to be stopped today, Thomas, not tomorrow." Grace stood, decision crystallizing within her. "Marcus just arrived on the noon stage. They're planning something for tonight." Thomas rose as well, alarm evident in his face. "What are you talking about?" "How do you know these things?" Grace hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal about Ethan and his mission. But before she could decide, Sheriff Porter appeared from the back room, his expression grave. "Mrs. Whitley is right," he said, joining their conversation without apology. "Marcus Blackwood doesn't come to Willow Creek for social calls. Last time 2 girls went missing. Time before that, a man ended up dead." Thomas stared at the sheriff with growing comprehension. "You've known about their operation all this time and done nothing." Porter didn't flinch from the accusation. "I've done what I could with the resources I had, which wasn't much until Hayes arrived." "Hayes Dick?" Thomas looked between them. "Who is Hayes?" "The man you were arguing with outside," Grace explained. "Ethan Hayes. He's been gathering evidence against the Blackwoods just as you have, on whose authority Marshal Collins Porter supplied. Though not officially, Hayes operates in the shadows, does the work Collins can't do openly." Thomas's expression darkened, "And he's been close to my wife during this investigation." The question hung in the air, laden with implication. Grace felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from shame, but from a flash of indignation. After 2 years believing herself widowed, she owed Thomas no explanations for the connections she had formed in his absence. "Ethan Hayes has been a friend when I needed one," she said carefully. "He protected me when Warren Blackwood would have harmed me. That's all you need to know for now." Thomas looked as if he wanted to press the issue, but the urgency of their situation overrode personal concerns. "If Marcus is already here and planning something for tonight, we need to act immediately." "Where is this Hayes now?" "That's what worries me," Porter said, moving to the window to scan the street. "He walked off after your confrontation, headed in the same direction as the Blackwoods." Grace's heart sank. "He's going after them alone." "Damn fool," Porter muttered. "He knows better than to confront them directly." "Not if he thinks he has nothing to lose," Grace said softly, understanding Ethan's state of mind all too well. With Thomas's return, Ethan might believe that whatever had been growing between himself and Grace was over. That realization, combined with his determination to stop the Blackwoods, could drive him to reckless action. "We need to find him," she said, moving toward the door before he does something that can't be undone. Thomas caught her arm. "Grace, wait. We should wait for Collins going after the Blackwoods without proper authority. There's no time for that." Grace interrupted gently but firmly, removing her arm from his grasp. "Ethan has the evidence he needs, and you have yours. Between the two of you, there's more than enough to arrest the Blackwoods today." She turned to Sheriff Porter. "Isn't that right?" Sheriff Porter considered for a moment, then nodded. "With sworn statements from both men and the physical evidence, I'd have grounds for arrest. Keeping the Blackwoods locked up until Collins arrives would be the challenge." "Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it," Grace said decisively. "First, we need to find Ethan." Thomas studied her with a mixture of surprise and reluctant admiration. "You've changed, Grace. The woman I left would never have spoken so forcefully." "The woman you left had to learn to stand on her own," Grace replied without rancor. 2 years is a long time, Thomas." A shadow of regret crossed his face. "Yes, I'm beginning to realize just how long." Sheriff Porter interrupted their moment of recognition. "If Hayes is going after the Blackwoods, he'll likely start at the store. That's where Warren keeps his records, according to what Hayes told me." "Then that's where we start looking," Grace said, opening the door. The three of them stepped onto the porch, an unlikely alliance formed by circumstance and shared purpose. As they moved toward Warren's store, Grace spotted Abigail Hayes across the street, watching their progress with sharp attention. Their eyes met briefly, an unspoken understanding passing between them, both women concerned for Ethan, both determined to protect him from his own reckless courage. Abigail nodded once, then melted into the crowd, paralleling their path from the opposite side of the street. 4 against 2, Grace thought. Perhaps the odds weren't as unfavorable as they had seemed. But as they neared Warren's store, the sound of Ray's voices and then a single gunshot shattered that fragile hope. Grace broke into a run, heedless of Thomas's shout to wait, driven by a fear that seized her heart with icy fingers. Please not Ethan. Not when everything was finally coming together. Not when there was still so much left unsaid between them. The prayer echoed in her mind as she raced toward the sound of violence, uncertain what she would find, but knowing with bone-deep certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. Ethan had not intended direct confrontation. Despite his words to Abigail, his plan had been to observe the Blackwoods from a distance, gather any final pieces of information before they realized their operation was compromised. But seeing Marcus and Warren enter the store together, their heads bent in conspiratorial conversation, something in Ethan had snapped. 2 years of hunting men like the Blackwoods. 7 years of sleepless nights haunted by the faces of the dead. A lifetime of violence that had begun on the blood-soaked fields of Virginia and continued through the dark years after. And now the unexpected pain of seeing Grace reunited with the husband she had thought dead. A pain that burned in his chest like a physical wound. It was too much. The dam that had held back Ethan's darker impulses for so long finally broke. He followed the brothers into the store, hand resting on the butt of his pistol. The main room was empty of customers, the closed sign already hanging in the window despite the early hour. Warren looked up in surprise as the bell above the door announced Ethan's entrance. "We're closed, Hayes," he said, false politeness masking immediate suspicion. "Come back tomorrow." "I'm not here to shop," Ethan replied, letting the door swing shut behind him. "I'm here to discuss your business, your real business." Warren's expression hardened while Marcus, whom Ethan had never met but recognized from description, studied him with cold calculation. "I don't believe we've been introduced." Marcus said, his voice cultured and precise, "though you seem to know who I am." "I know exactly who you are," Ethan confirmed. "Marcus Blackwood, trafficking, extortion, murder." Quite a resume. The brothers exchanged glances, a silent communication born of long practice. Warren's hand drifted toward the shotgun he kept beneath the counter, but Ethan's voice stopped him. "I wouldn't. Not unless you want this to end badly for everyone." "And who exactly are you?" "Bikers," Marcus asked, seemingly unperturbed by Ethan's accusations. "A lawman." "You don't have the look of one." "Just a concerned citizen," Ethan replied, maintaining a casual stance while remaining acutely aware of both men's positions. "One who's gathered enough evidence to see you both hang." Warren's face flushed with anger, but Marcus placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Evidence of what precisely? Your operation in Denver, the girls you've moved through Carson's Valley, Taylor's Ridge, and a dozen other towns. The ledgers detailing payments to officials, including Judge Rowland." Ethan's gaze hardened. And the special plans you have for Grace Whitley. At the mention of Grace, Warren's control slipped. You have no right to speak her name. She was mine long before you arrived, Hayes. Mine by debt and by right. She belongs to no one but herself. Ethan said, anger flaring at Warren's possessive claim. And certainly not to a man who tried to murder her husband. The brothers stilled shock, momentarily replacing caution on their faces. Warren recovered first, his expression twisting with malice. So Thomas finally crawled out of whatever hole he's been hiding in. I wondered if he had survived that night. You're admitting you tried to kill him. I'm admitting nothing's, Warren snapped. But if Thomas Whitley's back in Willow Creek, he'll soon wish he'd stayed dead. Marcus interrupted, his voice a study in controlled menace. This conversation has become tedious. Whatever you think you know, Mr. Hayes, whatever evidence you believe you've gathered, it changes nothing. Men like us don't answer to men like you. No, Ethan agreed. You answer to federal marshals. And Marshal Collins will be very interested in the documents I found in your hidden office, Warren. At this, Warren's control shattered completely. You were in my office in my private papers. His hand moved to the shotgun again, this time too quickly for words to stop him. Ethan drew his pistol in response, but Marcus was faster than either of them, producing a derringer from his coat pocket and firing in one smooth motion. The bullet grazed Ethan's side, a line of fire that tore through his shirt and into flesh. Not a fatal wound, but painful enough to disrupt his aim. His shot went wide, shattering a jar of candy on the counter. Warren leveled the shotgun, his intention clear in his bulging eyes and twisted mouth. Before he could fire, however, the door burst open behind Ethan. In the moment of distraction, Marcus grabbed his brother's arm, forcing the shotgun barrel toward the ceiling. Not here, he hissed, too public. Ethan turned to see Grace standing in the doorway, her face pale with fear. Behind her, Thomas Whitley and Sheriff Porter approached at a run, drawn by the sound of gunfire. Ethan Grace moved toward him, heedless of the danger. Stay back, Ethan warned, keeping his pistol trained on the brothers despite the burning pain in his side. Blood seeped through his shirt, but the wound wasn't serious enough to compromise his aim if the Blackwoods made another move. Thomas reached the doorway, his expression changing from concern for Grace to shock at the scene before him. Warren, show him, he said, recognition and old hatred mingling in his voice. Thomas, Warren replied, matching his tone. Back from the dead, I see. How disappointing. Sheriff Porter pushed past them, both, his revolver drawn. Everyone stand down now. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Marcus slowly raised his hands, the derringer dangling harmlessly from one finger. A simple misunderstanding, Sheriff. Mr. Hayes here entered our establishment after hours making wild accusations. My brother and I felt threatened. That's so. Porter looked to Ethan for confirmation. They shot first, Ethan said through gritted teeth, the pain in his side growing more insistent. After Warren admitted trying to kill Thomas Whitley 2 years ago. Lies. Warren spat. I admitted nothing. I heard it, Grace said firmly from the doorway. I heard Warren say Thomas should have stayed dead. Thomas moved to her side, protective yet uncertain, a man finding his place in a situation he didn't fully understand. I have evidence, Sheriff. Documents proving Warren's involvement in criminal activities dating back years. As do I, Ethan added, not lowering his weapon despite the growing circle of witnesses gathering outside the store. Financial records, names, dates. Everything needed for a federal case against both brothers. Marcus's composed facade cracked slightly. You're bluffing. No one has access to our complete records. Your man in Denver thought differently, Thomas said. He gave me quite a comprehensive accounting before you had him killed. The brothers exchanged another glance, this one tinged with growing desperation. Porter took advantage of their momentary uncertainty to step forward, his revolver steady. Warren and Marcus Blackwood, I'm placing you under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder, trafficking, and conspiracy. Put down your weapons and come peacefully. For a heartbeat, it seemed they might comply. Then Warren's face contorted with rage. This is my town, he snarled. My territory. I won't be taken by an old drunk with a badge and a band of outsiders. He swung the shotgun toward Porter, but Thomas lunged forward, catching the barrel and forcing it upward, just as Warren pulled the trigger. The blast tore into the ceiling, showering them with splinters and plaster dust. In the confusion, Marcus bolted for the back door, shoving Grace aside as he fled. Ethan moved to pursue him, but staggered as pain lands through his side. Thomas and Warren grappled for control of the shotgun, crashing into shelves and sending merchandise scattering across the floor. "Go," Porter shouted to Ethan, moving to help Thomas. "Don't let Marcus escape." Despite his injury, Ethan pushed through the pain and ran after Marcus, following the sounds of the fleeing man through the back of the store and into the alley beyond. The wound in his side protested with each step, but Ethan had learned long ago to compartmentalize pain, to set it aside until the mission was complete. Marcus was heading for the livery stable, likely planning to take a horse and escape before the law could close in. Ethan couldn't let that happen. The younger Blackwood was the true architect of their operation, the cold intelligence behind Warren's brute force. If Marcus escaped, he would simply rebuild elsewhere, continuing to prey on vulnerable women with new partners, new fronts. Ethan cut through a narrow passage between buildings, emerging onto the street ahead of Marcus. He tackled the man as he ran past both of them, tumbling into the dust. Marcus fought with the desperate strength of a cornered animal, landing a solid blow to Ethan's wounded side that sent stars exploding across his vision. Through the haze of pain, Ethan was dimly aware of them shouts of running footsteps approaching. He maintained his grip on Marcus, knowing that if he let go now, the man would disappear like smoke. "It's over," Ethan gasped, pinning Marcus despite the agony in his side. No more running, no more girls disappearing in the night. Marcus's refined veneer had vanished entirely, replaced by raw hatred. "You think this changes anything? Men like me are everywhere. There will always be demand for what we provide." Maybe Ethan conceded, tightening his hold as Marcus bucked beneath him. "But you won't be the one providing it, not anymore." Abigail appeared beside them, her knife pressed to Marcus's throat with just enough pressure to draw a thin line of blood. "I wouldn't move if I were you," she advised coldly. "I've killed men for less than what you've done." Sheriff Porter arrived moments later, followed by Thomas and several townsmen drawn by the commotion. Grace was close behind her medical bag, clutched in one hand, her face set with determination. As Porter secured Marcus with handcuffs borrowed from a bounty hunter among the gathered crowd, Grace knelt beside Ethan, already opening her bag. "Let me see," she said gently, moving his hand away from the wound. "Warrant bus?" Ethan asked, wincing as she examined the injury. Subdued, Thomas answered, watching their interaction with an unreadable expression. "Some of the townsmen are helping the sheriff secure him in the jail." Grace worked efficiently, cleaning the wound and applying a temporary bandage. "It's not deep, but you'll need stitches and rest." Ethan caught her hand, holding it against his side. "Grace." He began, unsure what he wanted to say, but knowing he needed to say something. She met his gaze, her eyes reflecting the same tumult of emotions. He felt relief. Uncertainty, unresolved questions about the future. With Thomas standing just feet away, there was no opportunity for the conversation they needed to have. Later, she said softly, understanding in her voice. "First, we need to get you patched up properly." Thomas stepped forward, offering his hand to help Ethan stand. After a moment's hesitation, Ethan accepted to sit, allowing Thomas and Grace to support him as they rose. The three of them stood together in an awkward tableau, connected by circumstances none of them could have predicted. "Thank you," Thomas said stiffly, "for protecting my wife in my absence, and for pursuing the Blackwoods when no one else would." Ethan nodded, acknowledging the thanks without fully accepting it. "She protected herself," he said, honestly, compelling him to add, "I just helped when asked." Grace looked between them, these two men who had each in their way shaped her life profoundly. One from the past she had thought lost forever. One from a present that had awakened her from grief's long slumber. Both now standing before her, waiting for her to choose a future none of them had anticipated. "We should get you both to my cabin," she said finally. "Thomas, you must have questions, and Ethan needs medical attention that can't be provided in the middle of the street." It was a temporary solution, a postponement of the inevitable reckoning. But for now, it was enough that they were all alive, that the Blackwoods were in custody, and that Willow Creek stood on the cusp of a new chapter, free from the brothers' malignant influence. The rest, the complicated tangle of hearts and histories of choices and consequences, would have to wait until wounds were tended and the dust of battle had settled. Only then could Grace face the most difficult decision of all, which path her future would take, and with whom she would walk it. As they made their slow way toward her cabin, Grace felt a strange calm descend upon her. Whatever happened next, she would face it on her own terms, no longer defined solely by grief or fear. She had reclaimed her healing hands, her voice, her strength, and in doing so she had found not just the possibility of love, but something even more precious, herself.